kina semdol kake mofaseda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Admiral here with Carneros.
Good morning, everyone.
And EliseRandolph.
Hey, how's it going?
We have 4 special guests for you today. 2 we haven't seen in a generation. I'll let Elise and Carneros talk about them and put them into context, and then we'll get to old stories.
Yeah, you guys have seen Hedliner and Vily running around EVE and on talk shows recently, but you haven't seen our other 2 guests in a while, and this is exciting to get to spend some time with them again. So let me take a moment to introduce you to MisterVee. Yes, this is the legendary FC that you may have heard stories about when the fleet got boring and the FC needed something to talk about for a while. MisterVee goes back to 2006. Was the famous leader of the European Union SIG in the CFC back then, as the Imperium was called. The European Union was just a special interest group of people who liked to shoot other ships together, and they flew in European time zone, and they ran around it turned into a magical group that you needed a vouch to get into, and was a big deal, and very, very special. And he's also still the CEO of Magellanic, which is currently now the 3rd oldest corporation in Goonswarm. If you go back to the older version of Goonswarm, still there. And then he's just a legendary FC. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for the introduction. Very kind words. I'm glad to hear that our corporation is not kicked yet, by the way. I didn't know. Thanks, everyone.
Not kicked yet.
We weren't so gracious to Shadoo. We kicked his corp. Well, I didn't. I think Hedliner did. But below me is a face you guys probably remember or have heard about, or some eyebrows that you've heard. Is Shadoo, the man who transformed Pandemic Legion into the mercenary nomadic alliance that you guys probably remember it to be today. He shaped the future of, he'll probably be too shy and timid to say this, but he shaped a lot of modern FCs and taught them what it meant to play EVE Online at a very high level. So yeah, I'm very excited. Both of these people have shaped who I am as an EVE player, and probably a little bit as a person too, right? They made me less ragey. But it's super cool. I remember FC'ing against MisterVee and getting real mad because he was better than me. And I remember Shadoo yelling at me to get better for making mistakes. That made me better. So yeah.
Awesome. So let's try to understand where you guys are at. So I think it's okay to say this. Shadoo, you're in Australia?
Remember you said a push to talk key, Shadoo?
Yeah. Or do you remember that key that you could push?
He can't talk back if he's forgot the push to talk key.
I think...
We're going to do this interview non-verbal?
Yeah, somebody translate for him. Well, Shadoo, he knows that we can't hear him, right? MisterVee, MisterVee, you are not in Australia, but you have been poking around EVE Online for a little while, right? I've heard that you come and go, or people have sightings of you and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I've been around for a long time. Actually, I used to play in the beta. I was super young. I was still living with my parents, and I played in the beta, and I downloaded it, and I went to go mine something, and I was like, wow, this game is really boring. So I logged off again. And then actually a friend of mine, and I think he also knew Shadoo, called Fry Fortune. Not sure if anyone remembers his name. He kept talking to me and told me you should play. He was really cool, and he was an FC in Goonswarm, and he kind of convinced me to play after about a year of talking to me, and I was like, you really have to give it a try. And I think that was in 2006 or something, a real long time ago. And I've been on pretty much ever since, until a couple of years ago when I finally kind of let go, or won EVE, as they say, where I just kind of couldn't really be motivated to log in anymore. But it's been, over 10 years.
Wild. Okay, I think Shadoo is muted, so if he could figure out how to unmute himself there, I think that's on him. Do we, Elise, do we also want to introduce Vily and Hedliner too, so we just get started?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Elise.
Yeah, so we also have so MisterVee and Shadoo are kind of like transformative names that you guys haven't seen in a while, but Hedliner and Vily are also joining us today. They're also huge names in the EVE Online universe, but they haven't quit. So they're names that you kind of recognize. Hedliner, the current leader of Pandemic Legion and head FC. A head FC, the head FC, I guess, but one of many FCs in PL. You probably have seen his beautiful face before. And Vily is also joining us from Test Alliance. Please ignore Test, not anything else that's phonetically weak. He is also a CSM member. Vily, were you on you were on CSM 2, right? As well as
I was an alternate on CSM 2. Yeah,
we count those. So he's probably the only player the earliest CSM player that's still playing EVE Online.
Yeah, back then I was a small gang PvP guy, and I just didn't have the block votes to get in.
Yeah, back then the CSM was very much a popularity contest, because there's no STV voting or anything like that. There's a straight number of raw votes got you in. I remember being very mad because I lost to Maziliu, who didn't even play EVE at the time, and stole all the PL votes from me. But we're not bitter about that at all.
Not at all.
She's fantastic.
Shadoo WhatsApped me and said that he may need to reconnect. But
I think he's unmuted. Can you say something, Shadoo?
And then he muted.
No, he's muted. All right.
I have a feeling he set the push to talk to just like the way you do on Skype, where you just toggle the mute thing.
He says he's not muted, so I'm going to send him a picture of him being muted. Hang on.
He is muted, yes. We'll work out the sound in a second.
But yeah, both Hedliner and Vily had interactions with MisterVee and Shadoo, as did, obviously. So they're here to like help provide some context, for some of the old stories, and also to reminisce with some old friends.
Yeah, once we're sure we have Shadoo able to talk, then we can get started. Can you try again? Without pushing anything? Because it says you have an open mic. Curious. All right,
the strangest thing is it was working just before the show as well.
Yeah, we had it working. Everything was going good. Guys, sorry it's a little bit later than we said it would be, but we went to set up Zoom like we do before a meeting every single time, and nothing was working. We're like, oh man, this doesn't work. Vily was like throwing shade at Matterall, saying he didn't know how to run a computer. But it turned out Zoom's just broken today. So we had to swap over to our backup tech, and it took a little bit of time to set up properly. But thank you for joining us anyways.
Right, so maybe it's suggested that it's the audio. So you want to check your sprocket by your name at the bottom.
I'm providing live tech support as we speak.
Are you? Okay, good.
Thank you, Hedliner.
Beautiful. If he needs to, if he needs to log in,
I'll get him back.
And joining us on the stream is Craigbot, it seems.
A little doggy.
Bots are people too, so.
All right, so the
Alrighty, I've reconnected. Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
We got him.
These web magic clients, you can't even change the microphone. For some reason, it must have changed to some other microphone for a minute. Sorry about that. How's it going?
Fantastic. Welcome. So you're in Australia, right?
Yeah, I'm based in Sydney, Australia these days. It's nice and what is it, midnight here.
Did you move? I thought you were on the west coast.
I was, yes. I was based in Perth, beautiful Western Australia, for 5 years and moved over to Sydney on the east side a couple of years ago.
So, real quick, how do you guys, your post-EVE lives, how do you guys spend the time? What's your hobby?
Oh, well, for me, I used to do a whole bunch of fishing and camping and going around the places, trying not to get bitten by brown snakes or falling off the cliffs. Managed to survive so far. Nowadays, on the East Coast, just touring around, eating good food. Stuck at home for the last fucking couple of weeks, but starting to get back into it now.
Yeah, snakes, cliffs, and now viruses. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're staying in. And V, what do you do for entertainment these days?
Yeah, so I mean, EVE is a pretty big hole to fill, because once you stop playing EVE, that takes then you get so much more free time. Actually, a small part of it is spent on being a grown-up. Especially now in the quarantine, I've fallen into the habit of, I think, every other person in the quarantine, which is baking your own bread and gardening. So, but of course, still playing some games. Actually, I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online. It's quite fun. It's very casual. Doing some chill raiding with a group of 12 people. And other than that, moved to Amsterdam about half a year ago. So we got our own house. Nice. Which, as a homeowner now, there's a lot of work to be done on the house itself as well.
Yeah, there's all your free time. All right, cool. Well, we're happy to introduce these guys as for those of you that have joined the game, wow, since 2012, these guys are just legendary players for EVE Online. The people that you look up to people that look up to these guys. So that's the context of who we're talking to today. That's why we're so excited to have them both here. All right, where should we start with history? Let's do story time and get into as much as we can about what actually happened in EVE Online when you guys were in power, when you guys were the giants of EVE. At least, where should we start?
I think a good place to start is probably like Delve 2, right? Because that's kind of where all the stories kind of began at, probably the best. Well, maybe not, but the FCs were all established in Delve 2, but I think around Delve 2 is probably like the best anchor to start with.
Remind me, which one was Delve 2? Which one was one?
The one where we won.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's wondering that right now. But Delve 1 is where we took it, and 2 is where we lost it, right?
That's what I want to first clear up is back in your day, and Hedliner and Vily too, you guys were there the whole time. You just have the disadvantage of still being in EVE Online, which people don't realize how long you've been playing and been, powerful players. But how did names get assigned to conflicts? Did people name wars back then?
It usually happened to do with a Kugu thread that had a name for like the engagement zone. At least that's how I remember it being.
But was it a thing to name a war while it was in progress or before it was even happening?
Yeah, I mean, back when then you had Bob, who had kind of declared their wars as like max 1, max 2 kind of thing. And it kind of followed after that usually, whoever was declaring the war to a degree would.
So but I thought those were like, you could name a campaign, but the war kind of, the name of the war kind of developed later.
Most of the wars most of the people naming wars are not overly creative. So.
Yeah. Okay, so with that, let's try to refer to some points in history. As Elise was saying, what was it? Delve 2?
Yeah, Delve 2 is the one where the band of brothers died, or at least lost all their.
What was Delve 1 then?
That's when everyone tried and then failed, right?
Yeah, okay. that was in. I remember that. That was the first big.
So Delve 1 was when Molly declared Delve is our island, come and get it, right? And then Delve 2 happened around the time that Hargoth flicked the switch and decided to take matters into his own hands.
Okay.
I think, it's coming back now. I think Delve 1 was indeed like the beginning of Delve 1. I think that was the first time I dared to go on an actual fleet, like as a line member flying, I don't know, an interceptor or something. And we spent, I don't know, it felt like hours just traveling from our space in the east to Delve. And then after like 1 or 2 hours of really laggy traveling, we finally got there. And then, like, what do you do in a war back then? You shoot a pause. And super laggy, and your guns wouldn't fire, and then you sat there for a couple hours shooting a pause, and that was kind of the fleet. That was probably the single most boring experience of my life up until that point. And everyone had been hyping it as like the big war is coming, it's going to be amazing, and then you're there like, as a new player, like, is this it?
Why'd you guys play such a terrible game?
I know, right?
Yeah.
But were you active then, Shadoo, in Delve 1?
Yeah, I remember Delve 1. I think we were pretty much the only ones based out of whatever region that had those NPC stations. I think Goons back then lived in Wicked Creek, maybe, some of that area. I remember we moved up there from Curse back in the day when we maybe had one tower in the whole alliance. And 6 or 7 dreads. I remember moving the fleet over. It took us about 6 hours to move 6 dreads. That was good old times then. Yeah, we were pretty small. You know, maybe managed to get 20 odd people in a fleet back then. So we were pretty much the scouts in Delve 1. That's what we did.
Right. So do you have any stories about Delve 1, or is it really Delve 2 where it started? Because that's, if I remember it, like that's where it really kicked off for me.
I have very vague memories of Delve 1. I remember certain things like moving in and moving out. What happened in between was a bit of a blur. Back then, I think Seamus used to run most fleets. I was only starting to run a few gangs. Back then, of course, Pandemic Legion was probably about 80% of the members were US based, 20% were from Europe. So we managed to get like 5 to 8 people in a gang in Euro time zone, which was challenging. But we started towards the end of it, get a little bit more traction in the Euro time zone as well, of course, for Band Brothers. I mean, that was their strongest, so we were getting smacked around like crazy. I can't remember any specific battles or any epic moments. It was pretty hardcore guerrilla warfare back then. Delve 2 was where we obviously had the people, manpower, the money, the ISK to go after and do some damage.
It's funny you say that, because indeed I do remember from Delve 1 I don't remember the system name, but we were all like kind of holed up in one system, and it was pause warfare, right? So you had to take the majority of available slots for pauses in a system. So it was like really sluggish grind. And I remember being there as a Euro time zone player back in those days as well. Goons was mostly US. So in Europe there was essentially nothing going on. There was no European FCs that I remember. So all you could do was just log in, sit in your pause with your other like 2-3 Euros, and kind of try to skirmish on a gate or something, and that's all you could do. Certainly
what actually made you join Goon Swarm? Were you affiliated with Something Awful forum or anything like that?
No, absolutely not. I think Darius Johnson famously once called me the only puppy that we like. I actually joined because the guy I mentioned before, Fry Fortune, he was in Goon Swarm. I don't remember how he got in there, but he was also a Finnish dude, and we used to play another game before that. And he was just telling me like I should join and it's going to be amazing, but I was way too scared about going to Nullsec or all that stuff. So I actually joined an alliance called Miners and Barges first. And then when I told him, he was like, dude, no. I mean, really? Minors? Are you for real? So then he just told me to join, and he wouldn't accept a no, so I joined. And yeah, pretty much stuck ever since.
Yeah, I remember those good old days mining. My first alliance was Knights of the Southern Cross. A very, very prestigious alliance back in the day.
Very prestigious, yes.
Look, man, Knights of the Southern Cross is where our journey begins, Shadoo, because the guy who got me to start playing EVE, I went to high school with, and he was in Knights of the Southern Cross and used to join your fleets.
You have a shared history there.
Him and a guy called the Nova, and they got me to start playing EVE, and that's how our paths crossed.
Yeah.
So it has a special place in my heart. That's Knights of the Southern Cross.
You guys go way back, right? Like, when did you guys bump into each other for the first time or know of each other?
2007.
Wild.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So, okay, you guys, you start playing EVE. You end up in this campaign that nobody remembers or very well. But then
I can describe it. What's the question? So at the time, it was
Delve 1.
Yeah. So you had a variety of groups on the eastern border of Delve period basis. Bob and at that time Mercenary Coalition were in. Well, Mercenary Coalition was in period basis with some Bob. Bob was in Delve. They had some branches in Fountain. Goons and a variety of entities were pressuring them along the Stain border, eventually causing Mercenary Coalition to flip, which was a terrible decision because I was an MC at the time and I know. And, you know, from there, the Tortuga thing happened. And at that point, the war really kind of spiraled off, starting off in Aquarius and in period basis kind of at the same time, with Band of Brothers really pushing hard back and actually ending up winning most of the war for a variety of reasons.
Oh, got it. Yeah, actually, we did have Sir Mole on with Celine a couple of years ago, and their description of that was the first time they'd talked since Tortuga. So Celine apologized to Mole for that. That was pretty interesting. But
wow.
that would have been Delve 1.
But to summarize, like we all got our collective asses kicked in Delve 1, right? So let's just kind of move on to the next one.
Yeah. Let's get to where you're winning.
You guys are like more
got destroyed in Delve 1.
Yeah,
let's move on.
Yeah,
happier times. Come on.
When the FCs are very fragile egos, right? So let's talk about the wars we won.
Okay, let's turn this story around. So then Delve 2, what happens there? Or actually, you wanted Elise, you wanted to pick up on Delve 1.
Oh no, I was just saying. So by Delve 2, this is where I kind of like become like a clinger to PL. I don't get to join. Like my personal story is, I don't get to join PL directly. I have to join one of their allies called Foundation in Sons of Tangra. And so that's like the only way I can get onto PL fleets in Delve 2, because they don't trust me because I come back from I was in like the GBC before that, which is the Greater Band of Brothers community, which is kind of like the pets.
It was 100% the pets. That's literally where pets came from. They would like, yeah, the fucking pets.
Yeah, so I was a pet in Delve 1. So I won Delve 1, and then I swapped to the other side for Delve 2, but I had to be like a clinger, right? But by then, MisterVee and Shadoo were kind of, I don't want to say household names, but they were like FCs that you could recognize and fleets that you could know were going to be like not shitty. And they were both on the same side too, right?
Yeah,
we were on the same side, but
when did you start FC'ing? I can't remember. Did we like? I remember when we did join fleets in Delve 2, but did we do any fleets beforehand?
No, I wasn't an FC then. And you're asking this with like the look on your face. Like I think I know what you're referring to right now. I was a scout back then, okay? I was like, I kind of want to get into FC, but I'm too nervous to do it. This is not for me. I just kind of ease into it, kind of tiptoe into it. And I got myself a scout, a covered ops, and learned to probe and kind of help out the FCs and get to use the command chat and figure out how that all works. And then something happened at some point. See, apparently there was a spy on command chat during an important fleet, and I was a nobody. I was just a covered up. I don't know what was going on, and there was this huge discussion like, "There's a spy on our command chat. Someone's leaking information." And Shadoo here knew who it was. He was like, "It must be MisterVee. He's the spy." So all my access got yoinked. Nobody ever told me why, but I also didn't get kicked, right? So if they thought I was a spy, I would assume I get kicked. So I was super confused, and that just set me back like months in my my FC trajectory. Now my role there was really I was a scout, and I had learned to probe, and later on in Delve 2, I learned how to slingshot. So kind of to have a dictator in your fleet, and you would like probe out an enemy fleet or an enemy Titan if possible. And you would kind of just quickly probe them out and warp your dictator there. So you would have them, caught in like the space of 10, 15 seconds, which is kind of became my trademark as well, kind of the quick probing. But that's where it started. So I remember trying to get these fleets bubbled for the AoE Titan bombs and stuff. Some clutch moments with Shadoo, and who else was there? Freeze, I think. Throwing his Titans around on grid. So I was still not really FC'ing then. I was just kind of helping, and Shadoo tried to kill it in the bud.
That's a classic Shadoo move, though. Right?
But that was like when at some point, I don't remember when it was, but was when all there was a massive leak of all the Jabber logs or whatever logs we used back then. And like as you do, the first thing you do is like you do a search on all the logs on your own name to figure out like what actually happened that day. So that's how I found out, because Shadoo never told me face to face.
Was that still in the days of triangulation probing?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, it wasn't. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't even 10 seconds. It was slower, but it was before people really kind of used it.
Yeah, back in the day when you had to know how to use probes in order to get results, there were very few scouts or fleet commanders who actually had the ability to quickly locate a fleet that came on grid, and you very quickly isolated the people who seemed to know what the fuck they were doing, and you made sure that those guys got into your fleet. And I think that's how I got to remember MisterVee. Yeah, okay, we had some first mistakes that were made. Some hiccups, but I remembered your name from there. And as I was assured that you were not a spy, I remembered that you were able to scout, and I think that's how we used to get you into the joint fleet. Normally, you were my warping spot.
Yeah, start of a very long relationship.
And I'm fairly sure in a couple of the BOS sieges, we ran out of any other Euro FCs, and I think I vaguely remember just telling you, "Nah, you're doing it. Just get on with it." I seem to recall a couple of incidences like that. So
it's so scary to see your first fleet, though.
On those boring ops, eh?
Yeah. But did you have that as well, Shadoo? Was there someone who told you like, "Come on, dude, just stop being a little, and just start FC'ing"?
That sounds like something Seamus would have said.
Man, in Eurozone back then, it was hard going. You just had no choice but to get in and start leading fleets. I think I started, fleets. I'll say gangs more so. For me, that started in Knights of the Southern Cross, because once again, it was predominantly a US alliance. So unless you wanted to just hide in a pass or hide in a station, you had to get out and you had to lead the fleet. That's how I got into it, just out of necessity, not really for wanting to. But back then, Snickerly and Snickwaff were based out of pretty close to us, and you had to get into a defend fleet when they showed up, and that's how I got into it. Not really something I wanted to do, but something nobody else
I guess it goes for everyone here, right? Like we started FC'ing because we had to. There was no one else, or
Yeah.
seems to be kind of the thing. Was there like a defining moment for you, Shadoo, that made you like, wow, that dude does some cool stuff with the fleet. I want to be that guy. Was there any moment like that?
I remember a couple of moments early on. I remember killing Seamus still vividly. That was like the first time ever that we got his vagabond that was like pimped out with officer mods and all the rest. He used to lead these 10 to 15 man Snickwaff training fleets. And we got him once, and I led that fleet, and that was like hailed as a hero moment. So I think that kind of got me into to say, yeah, shit, yeah, I want to do this.
The rush, you got that adrenaline pumping.
Yeah, that's it. What about you? Can you recall what was your big victory moment?
Yeah, there was a really, I mean, it wasn't, I wouldn't call it a victory moment, but I was there, you know, as the trailer went, I was there. It was, do you remember Junkie Beverage?
Yep.
Amazing dude. I love him. He was an American fleet commander, and he just had this, he was just so classy. It's hard to put the words. And I remember we were sieging something. We had a dread fleet out, and he was leading it, and we were sieging something, and we got hot dropped by a bunch of Russians, and we were like, oh wow, we're screwed. And he was like really calm and collected, and he was like, all right guys, we're just gonna go siege Red, we're gonna go kind of slow boat out of here, and we're just gonna get out if we can. And so we extracted, we took losses, and we got out of there. And I was still on grid with my covered ops with a Sino. So I was like, and he's like, you know, we're gonna stick around. Maybe we can come back. And Junkie Beverage JBev, he was like, you know what, we're not gonna take a loss. We're gonna go get him back. So he made everyone refit long range guns on the dreads, and he told me like, give me a Sino, like, you know, I'd range, but they can't shoot us, but we can shoot them. And I was like, oh my God, he's calling out my name. Like my heart's racing. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to do this. So I'm burning a Sino. And like, and he's like, we're ready to go. Come on, pop the Sino. Let's do this. And like, it didn't work. I was moving too fast. I didn't realize I was moving too fast, spamming the button. I was like, please work. And all he said was, it's okay. We got another one. So he popped another Sino, and we jumped in, and we like cleaned up the field, and we killed more than we lost altogether. And it was a magical moment. I was like, man, this is amazing. I want to be that guy, and I want to not make this screw up again. And then a couple of years later, I checked out the killboard link because I wanted to see like how did that fight actually even go. And it turned out that we lost like 3 dreads and we killed 6 or something. So in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing, especially these days. But I still remember it very clearly. Like that was the moment. That was like, yeah, this no other game gets your blood flowing like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's how you guys got the bug to want to be an FC and to step up, mostly out of necessity. What about you, Hedliner? What was your first moment where you're like, yeah, I'm going to do this?
Day one, we went to the first day. We went in Caracals to KVP and camped the gate there until Severance formed up to fight us. And I died pretty quickly, but came back in another ship more or less straight away. And like, so much like what V was saying, like the person who was running the fleet showed that you can, if you regroup and take a minute and think about what's going on, you can turn an engagement against another gang or fleet quite quickly. And watching it, seeing how that had, like 1 minute I was exploding and getting potted back to Amar to then frantically fly back in the new Caracal, and then the next like jumping back in and we were turning it around and beating them. I thought that was pretty cool, and I was like, I learned how to do that. I'll probably enjoy playing this game quite a lot, and here I am many years later still attempting to do that.
And still flying Caracals too.
Yeah, and still flying Caracals, let it be known.
And Vily, what was your first moment where you switched on saying, I'm going to be at the head of this thing?
So I used to be a role player back in Candid space, back before Candid had actual races, or bloodlines, whatever it's called. And I just remember the fleets back then, like, we're small 5-10 man gangs or whatever. But like people, like in small gangs, sometimes you get people who obviously don't know what they're doing or they can't do the simple math, and it's like, okay, we're doing this. I'm like, well, maybe we should no, we're gonna do this, and like they would just screw shit up over and over and over again. So I got really like, now we call it like triggered or whatever, and I'm just like, this is what we need to do. Stop fucking up. Do this, and like, just getting kind of annoyed at people, I guess.
Can I ask you a question, Billy?
Yeah.
What did you role play as?
We were Candid, so it was, what were we trying to roleplay? Like the Candid needed more representation with the Mar or something. I can't remember.
I think he means what gender.
The answer to that is cute Amarian.
Did you roleplay or?
No, I was my dude there. I was Robert. I don't even think the character Villa was created at the time. Maybe.
All right, let me throw this out there. Chocolate Rain in the audience wants to know. Sorry, Rain Chocolate. Who do you guys think the hottest FC is? I'm not sure how she means that, actually, now that I read it.
I think she means physically attractive.
Physically attractive.
Hedliner's dreamy.
Yeah. Even his
Easy
bunker
Hedliner.
looks good. Anyway,
It's just a very good webcam.
yeah. Okay, so this is something that we wanted to find out. Like, what happened after like that score was settled? Goon Swarm was in Bob's space. Bob was collapsed, turned into IT Alliance. There was a lull after that. What was going on at this time? This would be post Delve 2, right, Elise?
Yeah, so after Delve 2, like basically the big bad wolf dies to the good guys, which were like the northern forces. And then PL kind of like wanders over to Fountain, and Seamus has the bright idea to start building sewers in Fountain. And I think at that point Shadoo's like, I'm out. See you in a little bit, guys.
I think that happened way afterwards, didn't it? Was that really after Delve 2? Because we wouldn't have. Did we have supers in Delve 2 at Pandemic?
No.
I remember I had the second Titan in Pandemic, which I bought in Fountain when we were based out of NBC Station in Fountain. Was that between Delve 1 and 2, or was that after Delve 2?
Do you remember how much you paid for a Titan back then?
Yeah. Ish. No.
No, it didn't come to you.
I remember it was a lot. I remember I had Titan 1, and I couldn't operate the Doomsday device, which back then was AOE, and I couldn't do anything. Like 2 days afterwards, maybe this was between Delve 1 and 2. I remember that Bob launched a big campaign to go up way up north. Is it?
Max 2.
And Seamus was on comms, and he was like, "Come on, Shadoo, let's go doomsday them on the way." And I was like, "Shit, I don't even have the skill yet, man," which I couldn't tell him because Alliance had paid half of the Titan. So I was like, I should fucking tell anyone. So I was like, nah, man, too risky. I got spies on comms. They're telling me they're out for a trap on us. I managed to talk him out of it somehow, magically. And 2 weeks later, I got my skills, and I think we did a first double doomsday on some moving Bob gang. But that must have been then between Delve 1 and 2. Or, yeah, because, it must have been.
I really remember that clearly. It's really, I mean, thinking back of that day, like, I mean, the thing to talk about was when Bob came back and they started attacking Fountain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when they reformed as IT Alliance, the clowns.
The clowns.
band of brothers, and then when they got disbanded, they were the. Maybe Vily remembers it. I don't remember it. It was like some weeby name.
Kenzoku.
Yeah, there you go.
It was the RKK Alt Alliance, which they frantically shoved everyone into to try and recapture some solve.
I remember when Bob came, or whatever, IT Alliance came back and they started attacking Fountain. I remember very clearly because I was working together with Yogin then. You know, he was like main FC'ing PL. And I was there doing some stuff with bombers, like my first fleets with the bombers. And I remember Seamus had this tactic, like this was right around the time when the SOB changes, right, away from post warfare to whatever the new system. And he was like, no, we want Bob to kind of get a foothold into Fountain before the SOB changes, and then the SOB changes hit, and then we're gonna just grind them to a pulp with the new mechanics, and they'll not be able to do anything. And Yoga and me were like, I don't know about this. But that's how it went.
Yeah, so I rage quit for a while, didn't I, after Delve 2? I was burned out. I can't remember the reason why, but I missed that war completely when we were living out of Fountain and then got kicked out. That whole period I was out.
Wasn't that around the time you were writing your book, wasn't it, I think?
The meme was that you were writing a children's book. Yeah. That's what everyone was saying. Like, oh, Shadoo's gone writing a kid's book.
Or a printer manual, depending on who you were talking to.
Yes. It wasn't a children's book or a printer manual, but I was writing a book. Well, I'm fairly sure that was partly I was rage quit. That was the excuse. But yeah, I was traveling a lot at the time.
But Elise and Hedliner, you were there, right, in that Fountain campaign in PL?
Yeah, that's how my alliance or my corp ended up getting kicked because we were having really bad fights and they were super boring, and so the CEO of my corp, called the Illuminati, which had Jogan in it and Elendar and Destromath, all these big names. We were like, hey, you know what would be real fun instead of grinding these stupid systems and dying all the time? If we went to Lowsec and just messed with people and dropped police fleets on them. But for the big timers, we'll just jump clone back. It's no problem. No issues at all. And Seamus got super mad because we ended up taking all of the FCs to Lowsec, and we basically never really jumped back to help Fountain. And then Fountain fell like 2 weeks later.
Wow. Were any of you there at that defining moment in the Y dash, whatever, something that was like the killing blow?
Yeah, that was no fun. That started like a decades long curse for us too. The system of Y2 ANO, which is like right on the edge of Fountain to Delve. So it's like that system where it's really hard to. It's like pivotal because you can't really jump further than that if you're in Delve. At the time, supers and dreads and capitals couldn't take gates.
Do you remember Seamus is trying to scapegoat me into being the single person responsible for that failure of an op?
Every single Y dash, he was the only person who could reasonably be made out to be a scapegoat. Like the second one was exactly the same. It's like, well, I know man looks pretty dicey in there, and he's like, shut the fuck up and get in fleet. We're going now. It's like, oh, okay.
So
but that
he blamed. I'm pretty sure to this day he still blames you for like lighting a bad Sino or like losing a Sino, so we all had to jump to one Sino.
No, what happened was that. So back then I was doing a lot of stuff with bombers, right? It was kind of inspired by, I once saw a bunch of PL guys throw like, I don't know, 100 bombs on a poor fleet and obliterated them. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I wanna try to do that. So I started a small group in Goons Forum called the Bomber WAF. And we, at the time, we kind of, we were pretty good with the bombers. And we also learned some tricks that helped out the bombers. So one trick was that if you lit a Sino in a system and you let the Sino expire, and then just when the Sino expires, you jump to it, then apparently you end up in the same point in space geographically where you were in the other system. So we learned how to make some super deep saves, like, I don't know, like 1,000 AU away from the star. And then once you have this one point in space, you can replicate it into any other system. So we use this for traps, for example, or to Sino in safely. So we just Sino in people so far away from the star that it takes, I don't know, minutes to warp there. And by the time people got there, we were already, on our way. That was a very safe way to get in the system. We also used it to trap people. So we would light a cyno, pretty far away from the sun. And then we just jump some caps there. And then, the scout would be like, oh my God, there's capitals here, let's go. But because the point was so far away that no matter where you warped from in the solar system, whether it's a star or any other planets, you would all get caught in the same drag bubble. And we'd have like a huge fleet of bombers kind of scattered around that bubble. So that's how we annihilated a few fleets. But in the YDS2 fight, it was like, well, I mean, this is a risky jumping, right? We don't know if people are going to load. Let's just jump all the caps so far away into the system that even if it takes a long time to load, it's going to take the other guys super long to get there. So it seemed like the safest approach. So we had our super deep, safe sign already. We had our anchored bubble. We had our bomber fleet kind of set up around it. And that's when we went. And that's kind of the start of like the super slow motion. Like, oh my God, we're not loading. Nobody's loading. This is bad. And then at some point, Molly made the call that's like, they're not loading. Let's warp. And because it was so far away, it was the longest warp ever. Like I don't know, dozens of minutes of warp. And that's when you slowly, this feeling starts to creep on you like, shit, this is not going to end well.
To provide some context, the fight that V's talking about was BTAC-R before BTAC-R, right? It was the first big Titan like bloodbath. And what happened is like the PL side and the good guys, we jumped into this system of Y-2 and never loaded and lost like 7 Titans, which at the time was completely and utterly devastating.
Yeah.
It was alliance killing.
This is at a time when one Titan made headlines for 2 or 3 days. So to lose 7 in one go was a huge thing. It should also be made clear that Goon Swarm and PL were on the same side at this point, correct? Because they are no longer, they're no longer on the same side. I don't know if you knew that. But
I mean, there was always this occasional mistakes, where a Goon Swarm fleet would get absolutely annihilated by an accidental doomsday from PL, and then Shadoo often was like, this is a mistake, so sorry. But like, what are you gonna do? You can't reset PL because they were pretty instrumental to the war. So yeah, we were on the same side, but we were also like the occasional, punching bag.
If I remember right, we were on quote unquote the same side since before Delve 1, but we always reset the neutral between the bigger fights or the bigger holdings. So we had an agreement with the leadership that BL would be neutral, but not going after your space. I think that was what the policy that Seamus was always advocating and wanting to make sure that there were enough targets nearby wherever we stayed. But, I think that always led to some incidences and some, not so great blood between us.
So
there were a lot of people really, really angry at PL about that.
Mm-hmm.
You finally got your Doomsday skill, right?
Yep.
So what was it like flying a Titan back then when they were rare and instrumental in warfare?
Yeah, so I think the timelines are starting to become clearer now. This must have been between Del 1 and 2 that I got mine. I believe the Titan that I bought from Dutchy Rajan somewhere in Lowsec near the north was the second Titan ever built, which I think I still have if I were able to log into the game. But yeah, back then it was a big deal. I mean, even a single Titan on crit or logging on, you'd have your people, every known Titan pilot address booked, and every time somebody logged on, hunt would start basically for that Titan pilot. So yeah, it was a pretty big deal. They were pretty difficult to kill back then, and they had a basically a area of effective weapon that pretty much put a battleship into half armor or half hull in single shot. 2 of them would kill. 3 of them would absolutely annihilate anything that wasn't grid, unless it was a capital ship.
300 kilometers, 75,000 damage.
Yeah, the good old days. So yeah, we started to gather those as Pandemic Legion as a strategy. We subsidized everyone who, every corporate leader who wanted to buy one, and we used them pretty effectively early on in the game. But it was good fun.
I bet a bundle of nerves though to fly it.
Yeah, to lose one would have been pretty horrific. I think I only ever... Did I lose only one? Did I lose any? I think I lost one. But early on, if you lost one, you probably quit the game. So you have that on the back of your mind.
Especially in PL, right? The amount of grief you get.
Yeah. I mean, there was... back in those days, there was a high bar to perform. If you were flying an Alliance-funded Titan, you not only were supposed to have it on for every fight that went on, but you were certainly supposed to know what to do with it.
So you and Carneros have that in common, losing Titans?
I lost 2.
2? Oh.
You lost 2?
Yeah.
I lost 1 as well.
Oh, he did? Oh.
In your list of questions, like what is the worst day in EVE Online for you? It's probably the day I lost the Titan.
What about all those times where we reset each other and then we moved to MTC Pureblind and we used to fight you, and then Shadoo's go-to tactic was to just doomsday your vulture every time you came on grid. Those were bad days for you as well.
Yeah, so I don't remember. Did you start headshotting me or did I start headshotting you? Like, who started that? Because it was a theme between us.
I am 1,000% sure that you started it. 1,000%.
Did I?
Yeah, that was like your move for a long time.
It was my trademark.
Did you pioneer that? Headshotting the FC, killing him?
Yeah, well, so what happened was that this was when Goons was at like its all-time low, right? And we lost all of our space, we lost all of our money, we lost a lot of our people, and we got offered a couch to sleep on in Declan by TCF. All we had was like a bunch of Drakes, like, I don't know, 10, 20 Drakes in the fleet. Actually, we didn't even have that. I introduced Drake fleet, so we at least had a fleet that had one singular tank, so we could at least do that. And I thought shield was nice because it kind of shield reps were nice to keep the newbies alive. So we at least had a Drake fleet. And then we started kind of messing around with whatever Band of Brothers was called at the time in Fountain. We had the jump bridge link there, so we just went there for some skirmishes. And at some point they rolled out a fleet which was like shield, apox, and maelstroms in one fleet. And they completely shredded us. It was a massacre. So then we started analyzing that fleet, and we were like, wow, that's a pretty cool fleet, actually. Like, that does a lot of alpha damage. So, and Band of Brothers used their apox. I don't even really know why, but I guess because they had the skill points for it. And that was at the time when there was, I don't remember what caused it, but there was a huge skill point like exchange. Like some skills would be resetted. What was it, Vily? It
was the end of learning skills.
Right, exactly. So learning skills were scrapped, and then everyone would get like 1 million, 1.5 million skill points or whatever they had. So that kind of moment was coming up. And we are like flying Drakes, right? We don't have skills for anything else. So we started kind of theory crafting, like, what happens if we put our entire alliance into maelstroms? Nobody had thought of that. Nobody had done it before. So we went on the test server and we were like, okay, so maelstroms are notoriously bad for tracking, like artillery is bad for tracking, but there's also this, I think at that time, like target painters got updated or something. So we just started trying it out on the test server. Like, how many maelstroms do you even need to kind of one-shot a smaller ship? And to our surprise, with enough paints and webs, it was fine, actually. It was really fine. So then I started talking to Metani, and I was like, I think we should do this. I think we should, because there's another advantage. You have so much alpha, you can volley anyone off the field in one go. So we decided to do it, and overnight we transformed our entire alliance from running stupid drakes and whatever else they had in their skills from the years before to a unified Maelstrom alliance. And so we were fielding pretty big Maelstrom fleets just out of nowhere. And with that said, we were also starting to build up a pretty good spy network again. So anytime there was an FC on the field, you just headshot them. And this was in the days when an FC died, it didn't mean that the entire fleet would warp off grid. It would be the FC asking hey, someone take over. And that always ended up really bad. So you would get, that was a start of something bad, because we just kind of rolled with the Maelstrom, right? We got more and more and more and more and more. And pretty sure all of you have been on the receiving end of that.
So I remember that's when FCs, or I as an FC, started to fly a Damnation, basically. Massively tank fleet ship, because you did not want to get headshotted.
What's interesting about that, though, is that the period of time that you're describing is where larger alliances started to shift from running sort of a battleship fleet, where you would be told, "I'll bring a battleship that has this much range." It didn't really matter what it was. Shifting towards flying uniform doctrines, where everyone has the same DPS ship, and then those ships are supported by the right kind of recons or logistics kind of stuff. Whereas and that really was the game changer, because that's before when that wasn't happening, and large alliance. That's why early Pandemic Legion was as successful as it was, because we would just go out and what we used to call hedge trimming, just kill these large kitchen sink fleets formed by much bigger alliances, because they were all over the place. They'd get strung out, they'd have different ranges, we could fly lighter, faster ships and just pick them apart. But that was really not possible once people started standardizing their doctrines into an alpha fleet, which interestingly, our solution to that was a doctrine that everyone loves talking about when Shadoo's around, which is the AHAC doctrine.
Well, to be fair, to be fair, credit to PL. It was the introduction of, I'm pretty sure it was Tengu Fleet, that really hard forced that doctrine conformity in all the alliances in EVE, because at the time there was no real way to handle Tengu fleets in any meaningful way, and then that kind of led the change for all alliances in EVE to be forced to kind of have these doctrines or just get decimated every single.
Yeah, and we used to call them Thundercats, the Tenormen heavy missile Tengus. For a long time, what felt like a long time for some people, I'm sure, but there was a period of time where people were just at a loss as to how you counter that. And the counter was actually Alpha Fleet with more Hugans than you could count. But yeah, I think you're right. That really, those two events kind of catalyzed where we've ended up now in terms of quite rigid organization of doctrine.
But the invention of Alpha Fleet was also pretty good for you guys, because a good Alpha Fleet was pretty good, but a bad Alpha Fleet was pretty bad. And you guys were flying, armor hacks, Tengus, and you were shredding Maelstroms left, right, and center. When the fleets got too big, or there were too many fleets that they were always ran by someone who knew how to use them, you were having a field day on them.
Yeah, I remember that time as a golden time for us in EVE, because it really unlocked the Theorycrafting. So none of these armor hacks and Thundercats and what were some of the other names? I can't even remember. They were just ridiculous. But we had this Theorycrafting workshop going on constantly. And I think that's because of what you did, Lee, in terms of those uniform fleets and the need to counter those. And the way to counter those was with more and more out there doctrines, and that really started the golden age of Theorycrafting and creating some kind of weird counter fleets, and then countering the counter fleets and double countering the counter fleets and all the rest. It was good times.
So some unintended effects as well, like the introduction of Drake Fleet on a large scale to an alliance like Goons Swarm. It was actually Evoke who started the Drake fleets, they had solid Drake fleets. Like,
Yeah.
you know, they had a uniform doctrine. They had a lot of logistics as well, so they were able to keep people alive. But then, yeah, Goons Farm always pushes things to another level, like in terms of volume and quantity. So we were running at some point multiple full Drake fleets, which are horrible in lag and tie-dye. Absolutely disgusting. Like, it takes forever for a missile to hit. So by the time a missile hit, everyone was already pre-locked by all the lodges. But there was just so many of them. I remember one fight, it lasted for I don't even know how many hours, and we threw away thousands of drakes, literally thousands. And then the next day there was another big fight, and then almost nobody showed up because just all the people were still tired from grinding through all the drakes the day before.
I believe that was in one of the northern campaigns, Branch Tino, somewhere like that.
So you exhausted them. You exhausted them by letting them hit your face over and over.
You know that old Goonswarm saying where we'll just clog their guns with our rifters. It was that, but then with their drakes.
Yeah, I remember that.
So before, let's just make it clear, before the Damnation era, we'll call it, there was a lot of kitchen sink fleets where people just brought stuff that they owned, and then it transitioned to a more disciplined, everybody's in the same fleet doing the same thing.
Well, you had a strategy, like you were in a long range fleet or a close range fleet. So you were in sniper battleships pretty much before then. But everybody brought a different type of battleship. So you had Mechatrons, Tempests, etc., etc.
Well,
so you had no uniformity, but you kind of all knew that there was a certain sweet spot that you mandated that the fleet be able to hit out to. So you said, like, you got to be able to hit 220k or something like that. And that was basically the makeup of the fleet.
And the HP, right?
Yeah, dual tanked is dual DD tanked was the key point for most of those battleship fleets between 2008 2000.
Yeah.
And so the reason for it is, like, number one is, like, people just didn't have a lot of skill points, so they couldn't fly all the ships. But number two, like, I remember the mentality, especially in, like, the Northern Coalition, not NC Dot, but like the guys that lived there before. Their mentality is like, hey, this is my ship. I paid for it. I'll fly whatever the heck I want. Like, if I want to take my Dominics, you're gonna like my Dominics. And the FC was like, shit, well, I guess I gotta take this Dominics, right?
So there was a time where the FCs didn't call for things. They actually were subject to whatever the fleet players wanted to fly.
No, the FCs would call for, like, a long-range battleship doctrine, but they couldn't say everyone bring an APOC because some people just didn't have APOCs, or they just didn't want to fly APOCs.
Yeah,
but also it wasn't super practical, because back then, at some point, AOE doomsdays were so common that there would be no use anchoring up. Like, you would warp on grid and you would just align out. Actually, it was pretty fun gameplay because there was a legitimate need for tackle, right? There was actually this whole thing where tackle had to fly in towards the other fleet and kind of hold something down, or else it just would warp away and would never die. And you wouldn't tank necessarily shield or armor. You just had to have enough HP to survive one or two doomsdays, like Vily said. And if you took too much damage, you'd warp to, like, outside of a tower, and there would be your pit crew, your rep crew, and there would be like these 2-3 Logi heroes who would miss all the fight, and they would just patch up the people who were hurt, and then they would go back onto grid.
Yeah, I remember they got pretty silly there towards the end. I remember in Pandemic, we were probably the ones with the second most amount of times in one time. So we always had a fleet on standby. But what ended up happening is that I or somebody else had a spy on the enemy, normally Goon fleet, and we would listen out for their warp commands, and we would try to pull them into a Dictor pull bubble. And all we used to do is, just with 6 Titans or so, we had 2 rounds of triple Doomsdays, and basically the rest of the Pandemic fleet would sit on a Titan, just waiting to save if anybody got by chance tackled. But basically the fleets were sit on a boss around a Titan, let the Titans just doomsday the shit out of everyone, and be ready to sprint them out if you need to. That was actually a strategy purposely.
Disgusting, Shadoo.
I know, but it was very effective in demoralizing the enemy, right? That was the point.
It was, and when the AoE Doomsdays got nerfed, people were like, we still have all these battleships, so we don't need to be Doomsday tanked anymore, so let's just kind of strip them down and go glass cannon snipers. And that's when the bombers became very popular, because it was kind of the poor man's Doomsday.
I definitely feel
battleships afterwards.
I definitely feel like the prevalence of bombers more rose up with the probing changes than anything, I think.
I think you're right.
Actually feasible to be, probing. Like the old mechanics were so difficult, like, the triangulation system, like 1 in 50 people could even figure that shit out. Like it was so crazy difficult. People don't have no concept of how difficult it was to even just probe out a ship in space.
So the evolution of doctrines, I like this because people are getting an idea on, like they think they arrived at EVE Online and they think it's always been this way. And what you need to understand about EVE Online is everything has a history to it and an evolution to it. And one of the things you brought up, Shadoo, I wanted to kind of key in on, and that was you wanted to intimidate your opponent or demoralize them. So what was the psychological warfare like back then?
Yeah. The focus was try to make as many of the enemy to not want to play the game. So you selected the strategy that would make it the most painful possible game to play for the opposite side that you could, which would involve either pause spamming, doomsdaying, sniping, whatever else. And whatever you could do is whenever the enemy FC would choose not to engage, you engage them on the forums instead. Kugutsumen.com, I think, was the place to be back then. And the second that the FC that you were listening on the enemy comms, because you had a spy. Normally I ran 3 PCs at the time. One of them was on each of the enemy alliances TeamSpeak or Mumble. And the second that you heard that they're standing down is the second you pressed post on the forums. So yeah, that was the game back then.
And that's the EVE Online that I learned, right? Like, so that's how I learned how to play EVE, which is like demoralize people and then just post widely.
Yeah, it's unfortunate actually, because a lot of the newer FCs in the game don't understand kind of the comms discipline of what it would be like back then, where everything you said was going to get cut and pieced together into a SoundCloud that would then be posted after the fleet, where people would be like, you said this one dumb thing and this other dumb thing 8 minutes later, let's paste them together, make it sound like you're just a retard, and like, boom, post it on the forums, and afterwards people would be like, that guy's such an idiot, he's such a terrible FC, So like, like some of these people like learn the comms discipline like historically, but now they have no concept of how like effective that was, let's say.
Oh yeah, thank you for reminding me that that good old record everything, cut it and post it on SoundCloud. That was a good era.
Was it though, really?
No, not really, but it was effective.
A different time, right? Now some of the things that some of the things that were said back then in the heat of the moment were perhaps would be frowned upon now today, only sort of 7 or 8 years into the future.
We have a soundboard that we might cue in a second here if we can get to it. Just to go back in history a little bit. But,
maybe we can shatter some old illusions about the legacy of some of these people.
But
wait, so like everything, you had the psychological warfare of really demoralizing people because you basically want them not to fleet up, not to resist you. What were the defenses to that?
Well, just to be clear, I guess you wanted to. So the problem we always had in Pandemic Legion, the reason why we really got into this, was that obviously as a small alliance back then, we were not able to take anyone on head on. So everything that we did was to try to thin the herd and try to get the numbers down on the subsequent fleets. So you tried to grind the enemy down as much as you could in order to make the fight be one that you could take on. Because the alternative back then for us, which we had to do quite a lot between Delve 1 and Delve 2, was to stand out. And when you're in back then in an alliance that is really cherished being able to fight, standing down was very soul destroying for everyone, and very, something not any FC wanted to do ever. So, our tactic was to employ every mean possible to try to get the opposition to a size that was manageable, in order to be able to take the fight.
But that was Shadoo. I think that was your biggest, above everything, right? I mean, obviously, on a tactical level, you were super good FC, but if you had to point out one thing, it was like the total war strategy of just employing everything you had at your disposal, including, from sweet talking some guys to kind of back out from a fight, to just hurting someone who you knew would back out if you pushed a little bit too hard on that spot. Like, that's how you cracked the Northern Coalition ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I don't think I was particularly effective or good FC. But what I did manage to do back in the day was to be able to try to look at the bigger picture as much as possible through the spies that I and the rest of the alliance had, and try to use that to our advantage.
Convincing us that you were just poking the hive a little bit.
That's right.
We're just here to play. We're not here to, dismantle the Northern.
Yeah, the old PL. We're not invading. We're just. It's just for fun, which is now like copied throughout the galaxy as like the slow approach of invasion.
Yeah, I remember that. That was actually pioneered against Bob, wasn't it, in Delve 2? Our motto was that, don't worry, we're just here to have some fun, good fights. Don't worry about us. We'll leave afterwards. Even though there was a plan from day one to invade whoever we were looking to do that to.
So, sorry, Admiral, but is this the time to talk about spies?
Yeah, let's actually talk about. Well, actually, let's go to spies in just a second. So I want to go back a little bit. Shadoo, you had a lot of proteges, let's say, or people that worked with you. I wouldn't call them proteges. It may not be fair. I'm not sure, but maybe at least you could talk about who Gobbins was back at this era.
Right, so I think everyone here has a Gobbins story that would probably make everyone in Horde blush a little bit, because they don't know that version of Gobbins. So Gobbins, for those that don't know, the leader of Pandemic Horde now, his name is Gobbins, or Admiral Goberius. He was also a huge FC back in the early days of EVE Online, which I think it's easy to forget. He was a bomber FC. He had one of the earlier Titans that would bridge fleets around. He would do pos grinds and stuff. But he was like I don't want to say a second-rate Shadoo, but he was kind of like a little baby Shadoo, at least in PL at the time.
He was much more known for his Alliance tournament prowess. He was actually one of the really good pilots of that.
But he was a little bit testy at times, and it led to some very fun interactions between FCs who were trying to tell him what to do, and he'd be like, "No, I know better. I know better than you what you want me to do." So
let's hear
Gobbins.
Let's hear a sound clip.
I'll see if I can quickly play this thing.
This is Shadoo and Gobbins.
Gobbins, are you telling me anything? Do you have eyes?
Listen, no, shut up. Shut the fuck up. No, they aren't getting Doomsday right now. Let me talk. Okay. I had to jump my pod out. So I don't have eyes.
Take a commercial break and then we'll be back.
I'm you got this queued up? Apparently not.
It's a soundboard.
No, it played.
Oh, it did. It played. Oh.
Yeah, the one that Elise linked anyway.
Okay, we couldn't hear it, but the audience could hear it. Okay.
Yeah.
I missed it.
Yeah.
Can you play it again so we can hear?
I linked it in podcast so you guys can play
listen to it there.
It's the one
it's not fair. We can play it.
We can play it again while you guys click play on it as well. So,
all right,
because it's worth another one. Let's
do
go
that.
again.
1, 2, 3, hit it.
Gobbins, are you telling me anything? Do you have eyes?
Listen, no, shut up. Shut the fuck up. No, they aren't getting doom state right now. Let me talk. I have to run my
Yeah, I
pod
remember.
out, so I don't have eyes anymore.
It's just that sound you make, Shadoo. What is that sound you're making? That's is that what is that, like pent up anger or?
Just Gobbins used to drive me up the wall with his voice, and he's just never being ready to do anything when I asked him to do that. And the excuses that would come out would just, push my buttons.
So like even the most seasoned, like, you know, even the biggest personalities in PL, they knew better than when you were going off on you know, on something that just give it a minute, give him a minute, it's gonna be okay. And Gobi was like, no.
You could always tell when Shadoo was losing it as well, because the way he would pronounce certain words would change very noticeably. He'd start rolling his R's, and then there would be a lot of T's and other consonants. So it was just start appearing in words that they had no place in.
I heard his
typing would just go out the window too.
Yeah, I heard his typing would just get all. Yeah. Okay.
So good.
Let's move to spies. What was the spy game like, and how important were they? Because you guys have experience with that.
Yeah, I mean, spying was like Shadoo explained. Like, so how do you win a war? It's to ultimately demoralize people and that they don't want to do anything anymore. So how do you demoralize? It's a mind game, right? And the more you know the people you're fighting, the more effectively you can push their buttons. So that's why spying was so effective, because if you're listening to the FC, as an FC yourself, you know exactly what they're going through. You know, every single FC has, to a certain extent, you know, a very fragile ego. So if you know exactly, you know, where to kind of twist the knife, it would just really help in accomplishing your objective. You see Shadoo nodding. And so that's why it was really effective to have a spy. I guess that's why you had multiple, Shadoo. Kind of curious if you're willing to share some details about your spies you're never willing to share before.
Look, back in the good old days, I would rock 1 or 2 spies myself. I normally had one in every, because, you know, back in the very height of it, you couldn't just have one spy in let's say, in the Goon fleet. You had to have a spy in their alliances, their allies fleets as well, right? So I think in the heydays, I would probably rock 2 spies. One that was in the fleet. Normally, I would do whatever I could to get into the fleet that V was in, because you knew who the good FCs were, and you knew what was the fleet that you had to worry about, and the fleet that you frankly didn't have to worry about too much. So you did what you could to get into the fleet that you had to worry about, and the alliance that you had to worry about, and you could kind of make out the rest based on scout reports, right? I think the spying for us, though, started really way back early in the day. I think the first time I really realized the power of what is was the first ever time that I FC'd the fleet to kill. That was all due to a spy that we basically had in Band of Brothers at the time, and we were one of the very few alliances back then who would have one. This was probably pre or maybe post Delve 1, maybe pre-Delve 1, when they were really, really rare. That opened my eyes, I guess, into what the utility was. Back then, we would have always used an external spy. We had a dedicated one. But once that kind of occurred, I started to train my own spies, and we actually started a program, I think, that somebody in our corp sponsored, but basically we would pay for game time, so plexus, for anyone who would have a spy. We would pay them basically game time plus some extra, in order to just start off and create as many spies as we possibly could, because the objective was always to have one in in the opposite enemy's fleet.
Yeah, you really had to have one.
Spy in your fleets usually.
Yeah, but in the coalition fleets, that's kind of a given, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was at some point, there was this shift, I don't know about PL, but in Goons, I remember I had a lot of arguments with the alliance leader in the time, who was like telling me that spies are only meant for like the long game and, you know, the band of brothers, the disbanding of their alliance kind of thing. And I was like, come on, can we please use it for a tactical advantage here? Like, I want to destroy this fleet. I want to demoralize this FC. Give me something.
And that's the utility there, and like that's why, like, for those who are listening, like what Shadoo was talking about is that was perhaps so important to the way that we use spies was that he would be FC'ing a fleet for Pandemic Legion, but also riding along as a line member in the fleet that he was engaging. So he'd be like anchoring up in the hostile fleet or like taking their warps and listening to their FC whilst also telling us what to do. Like with regularity, like timer after timer after timer.
So there was this incident where, I don't remember exactly what time it was. I think it was it Bob or was it Del too? I don't remember. It was some reincarnation of Band of Brothers or something. And that's when I was doing the bomber fleets. And we had this really dedicated spy. I'm pretty sure Shadoo, you also worked with him. We had this really dedicated spy, and he was very keen on seeing the opportunities on a tactical level. And he also wanted to kind of do more with that. So he saw that I was doing the bomber stuff, and so we started working together. And with him in the Band of Brothers fleet, and you know, us together Theorycrafting and some more people Theorycrafting these drops, we would set traps for the Band of Brothers fleets everywhere we went. I think the most beautiful one was like, it was an empty system. There was one guy in system, which was that spy on his like neutral character. And when the Band of Brothers fleet warped from one gate to another, he knew exactly when to pop a bubble just at the right time before they activated the warp. He popped a Sino, and with that we jumped in like a huge bomber fleet, and out of nowhere, the whole Band of Brothers fleet ended up in a bubble, got completely annihilated, and they never saw it coming because there was this one guy in system doing things at the right time because he was listening to the comms. And that in turn resulted to Sir Molly calling jumps into gates by alphabet. So he would say, everyone whose character name starts with an A, jump through the gate and warp. And then the B's, and then the C's. So their travel, which would normally take, half an hour, would take hours. And talk about demoralizing, and talk about like people that don't want to show up the next time because they have to travel home for 2 hours. They're like, whatever, I'll show up later.
Yep.
It was a bit too good.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was useful because I would have a spy in the enemy fleet, and I would have my covert ops with probes, and I would have the fleet command with my main character. So I would normally be able to spot the direction that the fleet was warping to, go there faster with my covert ops, drop probes, and basically be ready to scan and warp to my covert ops the moment that the enemy fleet was landing. Sometimes even being able to tell which planet or moon they were warping to, warp our fleet there while the enemy fleet was in warp, just take a guess to a random moon and land on top of them, just by the sheer fact of being able to just visually spot and track where everyone else was. I enjoyed that part of the game the most.
Did you ever have a spy in European Union, as in like in the fleet of EG? I was never sure.
Yeah, I had a spy in Goon. I don't know if it was it in European Union? Probably not. I think you guys were very, very strict. But I had a spy in Goons. I mean, you guys were the best at finding spies as well. Got to a point where I had to have a separate laptop or a PC with a VPN going to US because everybody knew where I was living in. Normally people would do what they could to find IP addresses and all the rest. So you had to have a VPN, and you had to play through a VPN, or at least connect to Mumble or TeamSpeak through a VPN. So it got pretty, the spy versus spy games got pretty hairy.
Yeah.
We had to do lots. You guys are pretty good at trying to weed out spies.
So, Vily, do you wanna tell our little story?
Sure. So, I mean, this one was just kind of a comedy one more than anything like serious. But in 2011, I had a spy character called Tobias. So it's basically the exact same name as the Angel Officer, except with like one letter adjusted, because I thought it was real suave, like naming all my spy alts like Satil, Tobias, Estimal, like Keika, like, nobody's ever gonna figure out that naming convention. And this spy is, I think, 3 years old at the time, and like people don't realize how hard it was to actually like kind of level up spies historically, because nowadays you just like just give them 20 injectors, they're ready to go, right? But historically you had to actually like put time into spies, give them like a kill board history, all this stuff. So one of the like things you usually did with spies at the time was you kind of mid-leveled them up. Like, so you put them in like a shitty alliance, and then you got them in like a mid-level alliance to like actually give them some like kills and some kill board history and some, so you could get them into a good alliance. To a degree, much like a real person. And at the time, this spy character was in it, in a corp called Dawn of a New Empire, Dawn of a New Age, something like that. And we were in a corp meeting, and one of the things with spies you often do is like you join a corp that's off time zone your own, so you can justify your inactivity. So it's like, I'm a US time zone player in an EVE alliance. You guys don't run enough ops. That's why I have no kill board history. That's why I don't log in enough to do anything. And so we're having this or this corp meeting, everybody's talking about activity and all this stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I really feel like we should have more US time zone ops. I'm trying to justify my inactivity, whatever. And all of a sudden we're having this corp meeting, and I get a message on Jabber, which is like the equivalent of Discord now. And it's like from V, and it's like, hey, Tobias, how you doing? And I'm like, oh, fuck, did I just burn my spy? What's going on? And it's like, it's literally V in the same corp meeting with his spy, listening to my voice, and we're like, and
this is a completely unaffiliated alliance. We had no relations with Init at all. We were just leveling up at the backstory of our spies, and all of a sudden in this corp meeting you hear your FC bro talk, and you're like, what? Is that really him?
Did you guys have to disguise your voices with voice changing software or anything?
So I had to do a lot to pretend that I didn't have a mic. I didn't use a voice box. I wasn't that advanced. I just did not ever happen to have a mic that worked.
I hear like having your girlfriend talk a couple times initially, and then you're established as the female character, and usually at that point nobody asks you to get on mic anymore.
That's something I would actually never do, because the second you talk with a female voice, people are going to be like interested in you all the time. Like, that's not something you want to do.
That's not what a spy
you want to sound like the most male dude voice.
Yeah, the guys that do that are actually the ones that are trying to collect ISK from other players as kind of a Valentine.
Honestly, I never talked much on my spy, but I've had a spy character for, I don't know, since those Init days. And actually, the Init spy was used more for good than anything. Like, they were really nice dudes, like Sister Bliss and all the guys. They were like, oh, these are super nice dudes. Like, I don't even want to use my spy to crush, like, do some nasty stuff, because they're just too nice. And then ended up, becoming pretty good friends with Bliss, and they ended up kind of joining the Imperium through that. So that's also how you can end up using a spy. But I never changed my voice. I was always logged in on the same computer. I never changed my network, never did any of the VPN stuff. And it's been in Raid, and it's been in NC. Most of all, actually, up until this year even, to be honest. I don't think they ever found me, or they keep me in and they know and they never told me. But it's crazy how hard it is to recognize someone's voice if you don't expect it to be them, to be honest.
Yeah, usually you need like a voice profile that's kind of locked in your head, and then you need not only that profile but like an identifier for your brain to trigger that that's the person. So like, I speak on comms all the time on all variety of spies, and I've never had an issue. Like the human brain, the way it works with voice recognition is just, especially over video games, it's so hard for somebody to hear a voice, think, is that him? And then for your brain to trigger, I think that's Vily, right? Like, it's just extremely difficult.
I don't know. I've had a different experience with my voice. Maybe mine sticks out a little bit more, but I'm not saying I had spy characters. What I'm saying is I don't remember Shadoo, do you remember being on Alliance Tournament as a commentator back in the day, and you and I having dinner in Reykjavik after those events? Well, they asked me to get up on camera at one point on Alliance Tournament and be interviewed for a few minutes as the marketing guy. And I get up on there and I'm saying a few words, and I'm getting pokes from people going, I recognize that voice. Oh my God, that's you. Yeah. So my voice just I can't do espionage, but yeah, maybe yours, you can get away with it.
Elise used to spy on one of the AAA pets, and his defense mechanism was to adopt a Jamaican accent.
So in hindsight, it probably didn't play that well, but
Can you give us a little bit of that Jamaican accent right now?
I don't think it's appropriate anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it aged well.
But
I mean, I'm sure the audience would love to hear it, right? Like,
so it was more of like a Bahamian thing, because I lived in the Bahamas for like a year when I was growing up. But no, it's not gonna. I can't do it. But I will share a funny spy story that kind of also Imperium, definitely, who was not the Imperium Alliance, but there's a character FC named Imperium, who is an FC for the Northern. He totally saw through the Jamaican accent and kicked me from the fleets.
Why did he live there too and say that's a fake accent?
No, he was German. He had no idea, but he just he knew that it didn't exist. Like he knew that those two things couldn't happen.
But that time when you've busted a spy, and you know the spy doesn't know that he's been busted, so you can feed them false intel.
Counter spy. Imperium, by the way, as a side note, was pretty pivotal FC. He was from the Northern Coalition. One of the only guys that really walloped PL, right? Did you guys lose a bunch of Titans to him, like during the Northern War? I think like 5.
I think we fragged him back too, but to be fair, he jumped in and got black screened as well in the
one of those. Okay,
in one of those things.
And I think it was who's head of Waffles, not Waffles, but Snig. Oh no,
you're talking about
Imperium was Amorphous Mihi FC.
No, I know, but the guy that actually did the tackle on that was the guy who was in charge of not Waffles, but I'm bad for there.
What battle are you talking about?
Reza was the guy who got the tackle for Imperium. Imperium came in and took out the Titans, and that was a big deal at the time because it was PL, first of all, but second, multiple Titan deaths at that time were very rare.
Oh, you're talking about, I think that was Yay.
Was that Y something?
Y-W?
Yeah, Y-W.
Obviously.
Yeah, I remember.
That was not one of our finer moments.
Okay.
No. That was Seamus was in command then, wasn't he? In that fleet.
That was definitely a Seamus fleet. It was Seamus and Elendar who were like, what are they going to do? Just kill us? We're just going to jump in anyways. It'll be great. And we all died.
It's very refined.
But Imperium, that FC that managed to do that, ended up joining PL. Short time.
Actually, the FC of that was, I'm pretty sure, Yay. Reza was involved, but...
Yeah, I think he was.
Don't worry, we recruited Yay and Imperium at like similar times. Imperium just ended up trolling us. He ended up go AFK. We're like, oh, we finally got this like masterful FC. And he was just like, I don't feel like playing anymore. And then he FC'd once and he anchored the fleet, but was like a little rusty, or he just hated us. I can never tell. And he just drove us directly into the enemy fleet. And we all just got completely obliterated. He was like, God, sorry, I'm rusty. But I don't know. I still don't know if he just did it on purpose or if he was actually just rusty.
One last story on spies, Elise. Tell us how good the PL spies were.
So we have actually a hilariously similar story to V and Vily. Like they were mentioning, like you had to like build up a spy by putting them in like weird places. And a lot of those weird places were easy to get into. So a bunch of spies just happened to get into them randomly. But every once in a while, you could get a spy in, spend enough time, and they would make you like, not a director or anything, but they'd make you like someone that helps with recruitment. And then you just dogpile everyone you know in there. So we had a situation like that happen in a AAA like alt corp for the Maverick Navy. It was called Crimson something or other. So Faris Saloni was one of our guys that got in there, and he was like, "Okay, guys, like if you need a AAA spy, like dude, just apply, and I'll just push the button and vouch you and say you're like my friends." Even though he's Swedish, and then there's like an IP from Manhattan coming in, and then
we work together.
Yeah. So we did that, and then Shadoo had managed to beat down AAA so hard in a campaign, like they just did not want to log in anymore. And I do want to say, like, I think they were both V and Shadoo were downplaying how good they are at like managing like momentum swings. So it's easy to look in hindsight and say, "Oh, this is when they're weakest. Let's fight them then." But to do it on like a day-to-day basis, they are better than anyone else to have ever done it. So anyways, I digress. We eventually end up getting like 5 spies into this one AAA corp that's a feeder corp to the Maverick Navy. And then like the guy running is like, you know what, we need more numbers. Let's just get everyone in. So we all end up getting into the Maverick Navy. And then it's just like real downtimes. You're just getting obliterated on every fleet. Sindel Pellion's making songs making fun of them. That's like just getting thousands of views on YouTube. So they're just down in the dumps. So they, you know what? Court meeting time, guys. Let's do a court meeting, decide what our future is going to be. And there's 13 people, or there's 8 people in the court meeting other than the leadership. So there's like 13 in total. And 5 of the people there are all spies. And we are like, should we go to this meeting? Like, we didn't want to get burned. So we were like talking to each other, like, should we even go to this thing? Like, what's going to happen? And so when we show up, and we see only 8 other people in TeamSpeak, we're like, oh shit, this was like a sting operation. We're all going to get burned. They're going to like kill our ships now. Like, this is wild. But they had no idea. They were like, oh, should we vote on what to do? And so we all voted as a joke to join PL. We're like, we should merge into PL. And then it just tipped the scales because there were so many of us. And other people were like, hey, that's not a bad idea. And then they did. And so they merged into Shadoo's Corp, Northeastern SWAT.
Wait, that really happened?
Yeah. That's how we got Muck Barovian. That's how we got PK for a little while.
We didn't voluntarily, we didn't go out and cherry pick Perseus Callistratos to join our alliance. That was we self-memed ourselves.
That's so funny.
It's also how we got Marcus Dixon.
To undo 5 spies. Those spies weren't useful after that.
Yeah, good point.
Well, no, those spies really have good corp history. Then they're like, no, we didn't want to go to PL. We hate those guys. And then you set them up for whatever corp you want.
I used to name so you were talking about how you would name your characters after NPCs and stuff, just completely to mess with people. I started naming my characters after Moby Dick character, or my spies after Moby Dick characters, because in my head I was like a whaler. I was gonna go get the whale. So every single one is named after a Moby Dick character. Please don't burn them now.
Wow. You're going to start the biggest killboard hunt in history.
Yeah.
So when I think about you guys and all the stuff that you've done in EVE Online, it's just hard to really contemplate how much work you guys put into the game and all the things that were happening to you, and you were trying to figure out what was happening on the other side and stuff. But now that you're away from it, or actually a couple of you are still in the middle of it, what are some of the things that you wanted to know? How did that happen on the other side? Because you guys were on separate sides at some points. This goes for all you guys. Is there anything you wanted to figure something out you still to this day don't know?
Trying to think.
Do you guys
have something to do?
No, I think we were always pretty good to be able to, even though we were on opposite sides with V and a lot of the other Goonies, we were pretty good to just get into a pub afterwards in Amsterdam or wherever, Hague, and just have a chat. I think we got the goss out then.
Yeah, we there's so much intel on each other really that there wasn't a lot of things that I think are a big secret.
There's also this like fun little fraternity of FCs, especially ones that like had gone through like wars together or against each other. I know you guys played Heroes of New Earth together. Or at least you. I know V played with some PL dudes. I don't know if Shadoo did it well, but it's like Black Horizon, Jogan.
But also, we'd meet up. Actually, the first person I ever met in real life from EVE Online was yours truly. Was Shadoo. We were gonna hang out with Valred. Actually, he had just moved to the Netherlands, but there was something like, was it like the cats were still like they just came out of quarantine, so he could go pick them up. So it was just us. So we met up, and Shadoo bought me sushi and paid for it. It was very nice. And later, I remember this meet. It was in The Hague, Shadoo. I don't know. It was like
The Hague.
you were always on work trip, so you were like in this, like fancy white dress suit, and we went to like a gay bar in The Hague, and you and Valred started talking about SharePoint or something, and we were like, whatever, dudes, have fun. And then not long after, PL and Goons became like best friends again, and we started tearing stuff up together. So I don't know what you guys talked about, but that was a pretty pivotal moment.
It became hard to be Look, once you've had a few beers and hang out together, definitely with Valrat, we wanted to do something together. So I think Seamus was taking a bit of a break at the time, so I had a bit more of a sway to who our friends and enemies were, and I think I managed to. I think that was back in the day when we were mercenaries. So we invented a contract or two and managed to fight on the same side.
Oh yeah, that was it. That were good times.
So there was no contract. You guys just use that as
No. I always made sure there was a contract. Normally, it ended up being one of the UAX death or one of his old corps who paid us, a little bit of ISK to get on a contract, and that's what we used to do. So you just needed to know who to talk to and say, "Hey, guys, we're gonna get into a bit of a fight. Can you pay us something?" And they would normally
for the paper trail.
Yeah.
There's one thing to do. Let me ask you. I remember. I don't recall that we were actually fighting like fleet versus fleet, like one fleet versus one fleet that often. But I do vividly recall one moment when we did bump into each other, and I think, I don't know, we were probing each other, and it was like cat and mouse, and then finally we found each other, and within like 1.5 seconds, you got headshot. And you got pretty pissy, and you were saying, it was my kid. My kid jumped on my lap. I was always curious, was it actually?
I have to say I don't remember that, but it's possible. It's possible that it was an excuse as well.
Did you have it?
Oh yeah, I have two. I used to. Anybody in PL would remember. I used to have them in the room late at night and rock them to sleep while FC'ing, trying not to yell too loud.
Yeah, there was a point in the evening where the Shadoo's yelling would become much more hushed because he was rocking one or both of the little ones to sleep. Yeah.
If you're curious if it's possible to yell and whisper at the same time, it is.
I think you adopted a sterner voice.
I heard that's what Elise does when he gets mad. He has a very descriptive way of being mad, apparently.
I think it's just disappointment. I don't think I get mad like once. The rest is just like disappointing.
But you
one of my favorite like headshot stories.
Oh, okay.
Because MisterVee like always does headshot stuff, or always did headshot stuff. We were fighting, and someone had a spy in our fleet. Clearly, this is when they changed Doomsdays to be AOE from AOE to focused, but they made it so they could hit subcaps as well, which was it just did 1 million damage to a subcap, like literally. They're like, oh, this is fine. And so we're fighting dudes, and they would jump in Titans, and they would just headshot Shadoo. And then we're like, oh, great. Okay, someone else takes over. And then like I would take over. And then I'd get headshot, just immediately obliterated by a Titan beam. Then the next person that spoke on comms would get headshot immediately. And we actually got down so low into like backup target colors that we got some dude named Centra Spike who just had no business broadcasting anything. And Shadoo got super mad at this. So he went to our like theory crafters in like kind of a fit of rage. And I don't think he intended to do it. Like, I don't think he was being super serious, but he was like, I need a fleet that any idiot can fly and just anyone can do it. It's like, there's any of these idiots can just run it in our stupid alliance. We need something like that. And he just like left. And Black Horizon took this as like a challenge. So he came up with a concept of assigning drones on like Ishtars and Proteuses. So assign drones to one person, that person would be the trigger. And then Shadoo was like, oh, it's like a dumb blonde. We'll call it Swift Cats. And that was like the inspiration for Manny doing Slow Cats after. So if you wanna thank someone for that, it's MisterVee who shot us all the time in the face.
I never knew the butterfly effect of starting to headshot FCs ended up breaking the game. So much stuff had to be changed to undo that.
So the cats, tell us about the cats. What's all that about?
Right.
This
is it's actually a really shitty story. So if we cast our minds back to where to V when he was saying about drakes being a thing, when we went to Delve this is way after Delve 2. This is back in 2011. Drake fleets were a big thing, and there was a collection of alliances like Cascade, Imminent, and some other guys that moved into the void that Delve was, like at that period of time. And they seemed to all they flew was drakes, and like Manfred Sidious was the guy who would shepherd all these drakes towards us, and we flew Pulsar Battens to just mow them down day after day after day. And there was this really shitty TV show called Hellcats at the time, and that ended up becoming the Doctrine name for our Baden fleet. And we had like Hellcats Mark 1 through 5 as the fit changed slightly, and then the next thing that came along after that was the Tengu Doctrine called. We go, oh, what should we call these? Oh, Thundercats. And then the Swift Cats came along, and then Slow Cats came after that. And then Dreads plus Slow Cats were like Garfields.
Fat
Cats, like the Fat Cats with the Dreads and the Slow Cats with the Carriers. And it got out of hand, and then it slowly died off. There you go, that's it.
That TV show was
It was dire, and I'll dig it out sometime. There's a great post that you made on our old forums about like, it was either you or Graf, something like, oh, this show looks absolutely garbage, but if that blonde on the left like gets anything close to being naked, it will probably get good.
Yeah, that was Graf.
That definitely sounds exactly like Graf.
Exactly like Graf.
So what was like your favorite Cats Doctrine? Which one do you like the most? Don't say Slow Cats.
Hellcats.
Yeah, I think Hellcats was my favorite as well.
Yeah, Hellcats or Long Cats, which became Shield Cats in the end, which were Rail Rocks.
Hellcats were the Abaddons, right?
Yeah.
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 Which was the Doctrine that we had smart bombs on as well?
The Firelining ones.
Yeah, Fireline Legion or Fire Sphere.
Yeah. Okay.
We definitely stole that from the initiative, by the way.
We did. But though it didn't work for initiative, they tried it. Did they try it against us and it didn't work? But we kind of figured out, oh shit, might be something into it, and then we went and Theorycraft a setup that would actually, in the end, turn out as working.
They did it against somebody's drakes in like, actually I think it was Esoteria or Stain Area, somewhere like that, and they put a video up because they were so proud of themselves, and everybody within like 2 weeks had copied them in the game.
Yeah, but it didn't work for them very well, if I remember right.
Correct. They didn't actually do it well, but they put a video up. They were so proud, right? Yeah. Like that they had pulled off their thing that everybody else is like, oh, this looks like it could work, and then everybody else.
Yeah, if I remember right, they were using like medium smart bombs, but it ended up not working with larges, and then we just theorycraft all of our setups around it.
We have a very proud tradition of stealing everyone's ideas, refining them a little bit better, and then slapping a funny name on them to keep
claiming it.
How much stuff's taken from Russian players that nobody ever hears about? Like how many tactics, how many doctrines?
Log off traps for sure are Russians.
We stole AHACs from this little Russian group called SOT. I think they're still around, but they would do like signature tanking Ishtars that shouldn't have worked or had no business working. And so we just took the idea and made it our own. Actually, Black Horizon stole it, so you can blame Black Horizon for that one.
Well, you mentioned AHAC, so we have to bring it up. This is something that was part of the meme media in EVE Online. Some kind of SoundCloud, as we demonstrated earlier, escaped, and you could hear Shadoo admonishing an FC for being out of range with armor hacks. He wasn't doing it right. Why is that such a big deal? Why is that such a milestone? And tell us about first, like you and your relationship with armor hacks.
I don't know why it became a thing, but I do remember it becoming a thing.
It became a thing because your rage is so honest.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was probably lots of similar occurrences on our comms, but that particular one, I got perhaps a little bit heated at. What was that seeing at the time? I can't remember. Carbon Fury, yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny. What made it so funny was that he always like labeled himself as not an FC. I'm just a target caller. I don't want to run the fleets. I'll call your targets for you, guy. You need target score? I got you. I'm your guy. And he prided himself on being reasonably good at calling targets consistently and clearly, and picking them well. That was his brand, and him being absolutely dumpstered when some guy was making an EVE video by you was what made it so hilarious.
So I'm not 100% sure, but I'm willing to say it, and someone tells me wrong. I'm pretty sure Carbon Fury is the one who released that video.
I'm looking at it now.
He used to make videos. I'm pretty sure he recorded it.
I linked it in the stream chat.
Do we want to play it?
Yeah, you should definitely play it for everyone.
All right, let's play it. We have a link here for us.
Just a second.
Livonia is damn distance. Secondary is going to be DK. He's so close. Livonia is damaged. They're close. They're freaking very. Dude. Keep going. Livonia is damaged primary. Livonia is damaged primary. Secondary is D. Tertiary is going to be Legort. Secondary is going to be D-King. Okay, pull your damage on Livonia. Pull your damage on Livonia. D-King is going to be new damage.
Dude,
what is your problem, dude? You
why
fucking call the target.
Shut up. Curator is primary. You're so retarded. Curator is primary. Secondary is Blanco. What the fuck is wrong with you?
17 kilometers. Fuck you.
Yeah, but, dude, armor hack. Armor hacks. Armor hack.
Keep going.
Curator is primary, Blanco is secondary, tertiary is Sordio.
All right, we're back. I do like how that guy... Go ahead.
I've had to explain that a good few times, what was going on in that clip. I've gotten quite good at explaining why I started to yell armor hacks.
If I had to take a guess, I'd say range.
Yeah, it was all about range. I think we had like a max effective range of maybe 15 to maybe 20. And as you saw on the video, I mean, we're primarying guys that are 20 to 40 Ks away. So I got a little upset at the target goal.
Who was the guy who like tries to keep it together at some point and says keep going? Who's that?
I don't know who the keep going guy is, but I heard Freeze in there a little bit that I completely forgot about.
Pretty sure I hear myself in there as well.
Was he the one just going, dude?
No, that's all part of the preamble before they get into it. But we've always wondered who it was who was like keep calling. It was probably some backseating nobody who that was the one thing he ever said, but we never identified him.
That was his moment to shine, was to get everybody back on track and calm everything down. But armor hacks were killers. Like nobody had an answer for armor hacks. Shadoo, what did you have to do with armor hacks? Is that something that you mastered or something that you came up with?
I don't know who came. I mean, I think that was a Black Horizon setup as well, wasn't it? Elise, can you recall?
Yeah. So the setup is before Oh Shit gets purged, Black Horizon steals these fits from SOT, refines them, makes them a little bit better, and posts them on the PL forums. And then Seamus just flat out laughs at it. This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And it just kind of sits mothballed for the longest time. Then Oh Shit gets kicked while you are on a break. And then when you come back, you somehow bring armor hacks to life again and just start slaughtering some Russians in the north.
Yeah, I think that's when we got in for the first time into the whole contracting business, quote unquote. And because we had very small fleets back in the day again, I had to figure out how to fight a lot bigger enemy with smaller numbers. And obviously, I think it must have been just before or after the Doomsdays got nerfed, or that we were too small to use them in anger, or you guys lost them all in Fountain, whatever it was. We weren't able to Doomsday as much, so I had to figure out a way to still play the game and be effective. So I can't remember the first time we used it, but it had something to do with everybody was running Maelstrom fleets like in that video, and it was a pretty good guess that they would work, so we gave them a go, and that then became our main doctrine, because we weren't able to Doomsday shit because we didn't have Titans or enough Titans. We didn't have big enough fleet to compete in a head-to-head with snipers, so we had to do something else, and that really started the golden age of Theorycrafting and doing fleets like those.
If I recall correctly, you started using these against somebody in Fountain called Black Star or Black Core or something like that.
Brutally Clever Enterprises.
Is that who it was? Oh yeah, Bruce! Oh shit, I forgot about Bruce. Yeah.
Bruce. Yeah.
Do you remember I was in PL at the time, and I was I brought a Mauler to an AHAC fleet on my alt because I couldn't fly anything else, and it split PL in half. I was the old guard who was why are we letting someone in our fleet who's not flying anything part of the doctrine? This is below us. And then the other half were what does it matter? It's one guy, come on. And it just caused all these arguments. For a
I can't remember those arguments, but that sounds very PL.
That was when Leonid was still being very Leonid.
Yes.
And Yogin was being very Yogin.
Things have changed now. Things are slightly different now.
Yeah. No, I remember Bruce. Yeah, Bruce was our rebound alliance when we maybe got 12 people in fleet. We needed to find somebody who would basically, I went looking for another Knights of the Southern Cross, somebody who would form, because they would call a fleet just because an enemy got into their space. but we were absolutely terrible in execution of their fleet. So yeah, that was a bit of a lucky coincidence. I remember when I got back after that Fountain losses that I think BL was pretty close to crumbling, and it was only thanks to Bruce that we probably survived that period.
Yeah, we had quite literally. So after Fountain, Pandemic Legion was like licking their wounds. Seamus was furious, and like started kicking corps that he saw were like problems. One of them was my corp, so we got kicked. And his plan was to move to Geminate and install these new upgrades, these new solve upgrades that had just been kind of put into the game, the wormhole generator ones. And his idea, and to his credit, way before his time with this idea, he basically came up with the idea for Thera. But so he was like, well, just put these wormhole generators in Geminate and it'll be fine. So he spent like 2 months ratting and like doing alliance ratting ops to get the like the military index high enough to put these things in, only to find out that they didn't actually work. And like the wormholes that generated like the entire region, it would be like +1 instead of like +40 like it was supposed to do. And so our fleets, the PL fleet sizes were like literally 6 people until like Shadoo came back and had to like rebuild it all up from the ground. Because by then Seamus got like super frustrated. He was like, oh, screw all these people. They're ruining everything. So Shadoo comes back and like brings with him like this treasure trove of armor hacks, starts beating up on people who don't know how to fight armor hacks. And then we happen to just win an alliance tournament. And then that summer, like 4 months later, the fleet sizes go from like 6 to 10 people to like 70 to 80 because everyone's like, oh, PL's back, let's do it.
Did Seamus ever really come back after that?
No.
He came back for alliance tournament stuff, but that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He joined some fleets. He never really enjoyed the diplomacy side of things because, you know, back then it was big alliances and BL was not able to take anyone with armor hacks head on. And he was a big wars guy.
Yeah, he was a pirate at heart, right?
Yeah. So he came back to 1 or 2 fleets and kind of didn't enjoy it a lot at all. So he retreated into doing the stuff that he enjoyed, which was he used to run or join some, you know, Lowsec roams. But other than that, he really got into the alliance tournaments a lot. That was mainly where he played.
But he kept control of the alliance for quite a while, right?
Yeah, I mean, he did. I never wanted a control of the alliance because it was convenient not to have to worry about what would happen if shit went south again. So I think he stayed on as a leader for many years after. He played, to be fair. He came on every now and then. He played other games, but yeah, he stayed on.
He was very good at sort of allowing us, in following on from him, to sort of go in the direction that we felt was right, and sort of letting us get on with it, whilst still, if he wanted to come back and take the reins again, he absolutely would and could, but he didn't interfere from the sidelines either, which is quite different to some of the other alliances that have fallen away due to inactive leadership over history. Like,
yeah, that period really solidified the mantra that if you're active and you're leading the fleet, then you can do whatever you want with the alliance. That was what Seamus told me, is that, well, if you're active, whatever it is you want to do, you just go ahead and do it. And I kind of maintained that as well, and said anybody who is active enough to lead a campaign, you can lead a campaign. You can make your alliances, you can declare your wars, you can go fight whoever you want, as long as it's you who takes the ownership of being active.
very convenient way to also shift the blame of diplomatic incidents to the person leading said campaign.
It's also a brilliant way to con someone else into taking over from you when you want to go and do something else with your life, which is what you did to Elise and then what Elise did to me.
That's right. We have 3 leaders of PL here.
3 generations.
3 generations of PL leadership right here. But something Shadoo, I want to just continue on this a little bit longer. You built up PL. It was almost like a cult of personality. That's not the right way to put it. You had people that you were picking up from EVE Online that were all the great FCs, and even like space celebrities were wanting to be in PL. So you were picking them up. It seemed like that was the place to go. Was that a plan, or is that just something you naturally did?
I don't think it was a plan. It's just something that happened, and it wasn't very popular necessarily either. I think it was I made a lot of friends who were enemies, and I usually just invited them, say, hey, if you ever want to come and play in PL, join. And then it just one thing led to another. It wasn't really a plan, but it certainly was not very popular either in the leadership circles. Because obviously everybody thought that they were spies. Some of them were.
So they didn't like this idea of
no.
Everybody coming to PL.
Is it some people?
The history of any quote unquote leadership figure who leaves their old alliance probably left in order to not do any leadership stuff in the new alliance and just play on or save storage for their super caps or whatever. And that was definitely what PL was seen as. So we had this string of people who joined, maybe joined 1 or 2 fleets for the start, and then just became semi-active in chat, and that was about it. So while it was certainly something that we did, I can't remember it being ever too successful in terms of returns, in terms of getting more FCs or getting more activity, but it worked out, I guess, from the external point of view, that it seemed like the place to be. That wasn't something we attempted to do. It was a bit of fun. We were just looking for laughs normally in getting somebody who used to be an enemy to join Northeastern Eastern SWAT.
Yeah. Carneros, did you have something there? Push to talk.
I was not going to tell that story on the air. It was just
find out after the show when everybody falls into public. Yeah. I wanted to get MisterVee in on the when I joined the game, or a little bit afterwards, I kept hearing the name MisterVee, and Cool and Collected always came along with that. So what were like some of your high points, maybe the war that you were most active in, or what kind of role you had in leadership when you were with Goonswarm?
Yeah, so it's been so many years, so there was quite a couple different roles. I think one of them, which I'm really kind of proud of when you look back, is that when I said earlier, when we were really down and not out, but we were, the best we could do was run a bunch of people in random doctrines, that then there was literally no one else. All the FCs had quit. There was, I don't even know if DBRB was active back then, the Big Red Boat. Probably was. He's always been active. But that kind of taking charge of the fleet doctrines, that was pretty cool. So to be able to look back and say, putting goons into drakes made it very newbie friendly, because we had logistics and we could rep the newbies and at least try to come back with the people we set out with. And that later evolved into doctrines such as the Maelstrom fleet, Alpha fleet. So that was the one that came out of that Theorycrafting. There was a couple guys, 2 Finnish guys called the Devil and Lazai, legendary brothers who used to be famous people in World of Warcraft, and then they came to EVE and they were my Theorycrafting team. So I would just shoot these ideas and they would just do all the math and do all the EFTing and perfect everything. But we came up with so many doctrines. When they changed the cruisers, we had a Caracal doctrine. Now it's pretty common, but back then it was like pretty new. Harpy fleet. Oh
wow!
So much stuff came out of the Theorycrafting. Baltic fleet, probably my favorite one out of all of them, is Baltic fleet. It's like we were losing the war, and we're like, what are we gonna do? And we came up with a doctrine that seemed nice, and well, it happened to be Megathrons, and there was always this one guy in the fleet who always brought a Megatron, regardless of the doctrine. So we just kind of named the doctrine after him. So shout out to Baltic, and I think
he's still doing that.
He's still doing that. He's a legend in game and in real life.
Yeah.
So there was that, and
there he is in chat, I think.
Oh, hey, Baltic. But also Vily, like the stuff that we did together when I got my first job and I moved back to my parents for like a couple months to try and find an apartment. I couldn't really speak on comms because I thought it was awkward to like yell at my computer while my parents were home. So I was like, what do you do, right? So instead, Vily was was the champion then, and I was feeding Vily with this intel because I did have this spy, right? So I had this spy,
I remember these days, yeah.
Man, I remember this. There was this one fleet, and I think it was just perfect. Like you were in charge of the main fleet. We had a couple other fleets, and I was kind of in charge of the channel command. So I was kind of FC'ing the FCs,
right? Against, I believe, it was Evoke and Raidnet.
Yeah, and this was at the time when fleets were pretty logistics heavy and stuff. And so what I did was that I kept doing like checking out the scans of all the fleets on grid, and I was listening to the spy intel and kind of compiling it all together. And when you would hear one of the enemy fleets kind of complain that they couldn't break targets anymore, so we would direct all of the friendly fleets, like 4 fleets we had, to just focus on PL, for example, until you would hear PL say, we're not breaking anything anymore. And then we would just leave the remainders of that fleet and we would focus on another one. And we just go down the list. And that was just the execution there. That was I think one of our finest moments, really. And so even though we couldn't speak, we were still kind of taking a more kind of higher up role, which was super fun.
Speaking of stats, because you said you had theory crafters, these brothers that used to throw ideas at them and they would come up with the numbers and all that sort of stuff. I've heard that's what CCP Fozzie's role was in PL, that he was like the number cruncher. Is there any truth to that?
Not really, no. I don't. That's a common misconception. He was never very active as a player. He would come on fleets every now and again. He played mainly for the Alliance tournament and had a role in helping to develop fits and specific teams and loadouts for Alliance tournament matches. But that was all sort of a big piece of work done by a fairly wide group of people. It wasn't just down to one person. Like Black Horizon was another guy who Elise mentions a lot, who was involved very heavily in that. And there are a bunch of other people who kind of got involved too. It wasn't just ever on him.
No, these are theory crafters that you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
The guys that put together the concepts of what would work.
Yeah.
And so what's the FC's relationship to a theory crafter?
Volatile.
But you would say something like, this is what we're up against. This is what we need to do. Get me a ship that can do that. Get me a fleet.
That was often the ask, and it was often an ask which was born out of rage and frustration, as we talked about earlier. And it was one of those things where the machine would churn out lots of ideas, and they would get thrown at the wall, and some of them would stick, and some of them got peeled off. And there were a few disasters along the way, and sometimes there were some which never really got off the ground, and a few gems came out as well. Like Navy Apox was a really good one. It's a simple and effective one that we ignored for a long period of time, and then suddenly embraced.
Unfortunately, the theory crafters of EVE have a tendency to be theory crafters, and that doesn't theory doesn't always match reality, right? So it'd be very I don't know how many literally I think since 2007 I've been hearing about ECM bursting scorpions being the new meta from theory crafters. Like, this is going to be a thing, guys, and every time it triggers me because there's massive difference between what theoretically you can do and what executionally you can do, and that doesn't always match, right? It's a
But really, we had such a string of bad ideas in Goons Formers 1. They were not bad ideas. They were actually acted upon. Like, there was this time when the squad I was very much involved with the European Union, we were very small and pretty well organized. In some ways, you could maybe compare it to PL a little bit, that the fleet compositions were very tight, and we would try out doctrines that only worked at a certain medium scale, and with everyone being kind of on board. And sometimes these doctrine got kind of hijacked and projected to the coalition level and expected to work. And so I remember we were going into the Fountain War against, was it Test? With EG doctrines. So they were Tempest fleet issues and Ham Tengus. So you're talking like huge scale fights going into it with ships that had an effective range of like 10, 20 kilometers, which were really good if you're a small crew, like aggressively warping onto other fleets. But in the lag and tie-dye and the mess of a large-scale, multiple thousands people fight, that did not work at all. And they were also impossible to replace when they died. So that's why, in theory, it seems good. How many times have alliances and coalitions not adopted some kind of missile doctrine thinking it's great? Because on paper it looks amazing. There's a lot of damage, it has all the utility, but then in tie-dye it takes minutes for the damage to arrive, and by the time they will already be repped. There's this kind of back and forth on like the theory crafting and the mechanical level, like what module should you fit? And like Vily said, like the practical, does this even work? Is it gonna happen at this scale?
I remember the very first battles of the Fountain War in B-D, where we had TFIs. We called them Tech Fleet, I think, because we were really rich with technetium at the time. So we're like, we're just really rich. And we're taking this fight, and I think we were out trading the enemy in like battleships, like 2-to-1. They were using like APOCs and Domis or whatever, and we were like 2-to-1. There's like really good, but our ships were twice as expensive and like 3 times more difficult to replace. So like, we were winning the battle, but we were still losing, and it was arguably one of the most frustrating. Like, I think we scrapped both fleets within like 2 weeks because it was another battle in I don't know, whatever the old Galente system, like Fortac something maybe. I can't remember, in Fountain.
Yeah, that's when we switched to the Megathrons.
Yeah, we had like, because I think it was Laz or myself had the Tengu fleet, and like we literally couldn't use it because it's like the second this devolves into a brawl, you have to be able to take losses, and losing 800 mil Tengus or whatever they were at the time was just not,
Why didn't you guys speak up though? Like, I wasn't very active at the time, I think, getting a bit bored of the large scale stuff, but really, you and Laz went into that. Did you get roped into it, or what happened there? Why did you go into those fights?
Because they're fights. I want to have fight. I don't know what you mean, like with those doctrines, like.
Yeah. Or the war itself.
The war was good.
The war was,
over.
After a while, war always breaks out, right? But
what was the Fountain War actually about?
Ego.
I can't remember. I've seen the logs from both sides now, and suffice it to say, I know which side started it. Let's say, but I mean, Goons had their reasons and tested their reasons. It was just like a good war to have. Like, it was on the border of both sides. It was moderately close. The sides were like proportionally equal. There's a lot of opportunity for conflict. It was just one of those really good wars, in my opinion.
That was the war that PL didn't participate in, right?
Yep.
Or Black Legion or PL?
PL.
Yeah, you guys were on the other side of the galaxy. No, you were there for at least a few of the fights.
They bailed out, though.
So I personally participated. I joined test with an old, with an FC character. So I FC test fleets, but PL did not participate.
Were you on a contract?
We deployed the Syndicate and then decided to focus on the Alliance tournament instead, which we ended up winning, by the way. So that was a good decision.
Well, it was in the middle of the Fountain War that you guys lost all those caps to the what's his name trap? The broadcast? Is that? I can't remember who it was.
Bandwidth,
yeah, the bandwidth trap. Like, where you guys.
Yeah, it was a period where we were sort of transitioning out of. We'd spent a long time working the year before with Test and the Honey Badger Coalition pushing AAA out of the south, and then we went and took the drone regions at the beginning of 2013, and then we just floated around for quite some time doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and no one was really up for getting into the middle of another war, like a big one, because our role at the time was very much one of, we couldn't just sort of be that irritating third party that would sort of show up and shoot whoever was winning, to try and, in some kind of self-righteous and fulfilling way, tip the scales back towards the other way. Like, we always ended up being like the drivers in a coalition, and there was no one who really wanted to do that at the time.
I mean, Manny wanted to. Manny always wanted.
Yeah.
If you tell Manny, hey, you can fight Goons if you want, he'll be like, yo, I'm there. I will be there in a heartbeat.
Well,
I'm fairly sure I had a sideline agreement with Mitani not to get PL involved as well. I seem to recall something going on there.
Yeah.
Seem to recall something there too.
Talk about that, because this is what I understood, that you were close with Imperium. Oh, sorry, you were close with Goon Swarm. There was something else at the time, and
The CFC.
The CFC, and so that relationship was partly you and your diplomatic leanings, but Manfred Sidious had taken over at that point, and he was against Goon Swarm. So there was a change in the leadership direction of PL at that time. But tell us about this deal you might have had.
So one thing about PL was that Seamus never liked Goons. Mitani's Goons. Manfred absolutely hated them. There were these different camps, but I think it's, the whole ethos of the Alliance was back then, if you're active and you want to take the lead, you can run whatever personal vendetta you want. So I think we gave Manny a go on that disguise as well. So, there were a couple of occasions, but I personally got on pretty well with few people in the Goon Swarm leadership. I got on very well with few of the Test leadership as well, through the hard slogs of Delve 2, when you fight along somebody for 18 hours constantly. I mean, in a single battle, you kind of get to know each other quite well. So I always was in the camp that we should have some skirmishes, but we should never what's the point in a big drawn-out war? I didn't have the motivation for that. So I think back in the day, I heard Montolio's, who was Test's leader at the time, and Mitani's side, and I saw, obviously the behind-the-scenes conversations as well. So I think there was a mutual agreement with all parties to say, look, we're gonna stay out of it. But if somebody else in PL is gonna take the reins, they can do so.
Guys, stop writing Shadoo.
More of a, let's call it a gentleman's agreement, that I had no burning desire to get into a big drawn-out war against people that I, personally liked quite a lot.
Wow. So that was genuine. You didn't want to fight Goon Swarm.
No, I never had a desire to fight a Test or Goon Swarm.
I can remember a couple of occasions before the Fountain War where Shadoo was a guest FC for a CFC fleet. And those were amazing fun to fly in also.
Yeah, the guest FC was a good concept.
Oh yeah, well, that's how we got to know each other, V, because you were one of the FC exchange students that came across to be in Northeastern SWAT for a while.
Yeah, but do you guys think that's like a problem for the game, that everyone like gets to know each other on a personal level? Like, there's so many people who go to meetups, they go to FanFest, they become friends. Like, are you really?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. Like, so when Black Legion rose to sort of its peak around the time, just shortly after the time that we've just talked about, right? And for the longest time, Elo Knight, when I started taking a more leading role in Pandemic Legion as well, he was like my biggest foe and like enemy and nemesis in every respect. And there was a long period of time where we would just all we were doing was dedicating time to fighting each other's alliances to the death. And then years later, he's one of my best friends now. Like, he doesn't play EVE very much anymore, but still talk to him pretty much every day. We like hang out a couple of times a year. That's pretty cool as well. Like, people come and go and move on. I don't think it's a problem at all. It's not bad for the game either. Like, you were friends with Shadoo for years and years and years.
Obviously, it wasn't bad for the game, but like, now that you're best friends with him, like, would you dedicate 18 hours a day, like Shadoo said, in some drawn out slugfest, screwing up his stuff?
I mean, let's see. If he gets super active, I might have to, right?
Is that a challenge?
See, for me, that became a problem because I think for the game, it probably would have been better if there wasn't all that diplomacy, quote unquote, diplomacy going on. And the diplomacy, let's be honest, was just, I knew the guys, I had beers with them, I enjoyed, I didn't feel motivated to spend hours and hours. I mean, back then, and I'm sure it's now, to do a proper war was a massive time commitment. And I mean a massive time commitment. And you would only be motivated to do so against somebody you didn't really necessarily personally know very well, at least for me. So I think, there probably were periods in EVE's history where it would have been better served if some of us didn't know each other as well as we did.
Especially when you get to the points where like you're snipping together things that they're saying in order to like demotivate the rest of their like alliance against them. Like, that's hard to do to someone that you kind of like and certainly don't have any ill feelings towards.
I mean, clearly you guys are just too nice.
Right? But like, imagine if like Mitani and Vince Draken turned out to be best friends in real life, the history of EVE would have gone a completely different way.
That's like Itchy and Scratchy. That just could never happen. But yeah, I see what you mean, and especially when you think about the motivation and the effort and the real world man-hour commitment to take someone down and humiliate them in the process to discourage their members from liking that FC. Let's hit some key moments before we wrap up. And these are things that you guys were involved with historically. The moment where Doomsdays destroyed a dreadnought, that changed the game completely. What happened there? I remember Shadoo's voice being on that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It was the Delve 2 celebration party.
Was it the victory?
The 23
thing?
Yeah. 23 Titans to pop a carrier.
Someone
that was just a silly thing, right?
Yeah, there was no actual significance to the event. It was just like...
But it was a demonstration of power that CCP reacted to. So I'll explain it if you guys can correct me. I wasn't there at the time. Or does one of you want to explain what happened?
I mean, sure. It was like so after Delve 2, like the winning side got all of their Titans together and did like this big conga, this conga line celebration. There were carriers there. Someone had the bright idea, probably Shadoo actually.
I think it was Viper's idea, wasn't it?
Yeah, they had the bright idea to shove Viper in a carrier, like a max tank carrier. And the idea was, we now have so many Titans together on one side that we can activate our Titans, like we can coordinate our Doomsdays and actually kill a capital.
That was it. It was the first time that all those Titans were on the same grid. And they had so much firepower. And again, this is area of effect that they could take out now carriers. And I think a Dreadnought almost died, but you guys stopped it before the Dreadnought died. But it wasn't long after that CCP decided something needed to be done about the Titan area of effect, Doomsday. It needed to become a directional weapon where it could only destroy one capital ship. I think that's what where they changed.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily had to do with that event of like the showcase of look how powerful we all are, kind of swinging our.
To be honest,
Titans
after that
around.
they changed it so you could shoot any ship at the time, right? It went from AOE to targeted any ship to targeted cap.
Yes, you could shoot a subcap with it.
That's when we all had to train new FCs because the main FCs got obliterated.
Always FC with a covert assault on the freaking grid.
Okay. Another, let's see, this is a Noisy Gamer asking, what was the story with kicking Kriba out of Pravi? Because he used to have a marketplace in 9UY. And he said that I heard that Shadoo led fleets to do that.
Did I? It's possible. I mean, you know, we did some, it was hard to, I mean, back then you needed to motivate a lot of people to log on and keep going, right? So you ended up having to do some things that would just simply raise some eyebrows and get people motivated to go at it. And I can't say that I remember going after Kriba, but it's possible.
And sometimes you just have to do things that are funny to motivate people.
Yeah.
I will say one time, I do remember that there was some like bad blood between PL and Kriba because we had a contract that Kriba was a third party for, like when we were doing mercenary stuff. And Kriba was like ended up returning part of the money because it was like against the spirit of the contract or something. But the contract like clearly stated that we would deserve like some sort of fee. I think it was for killing or shooting at Atlas. And so we were like super mad. We're like, oh man, I know Seamus was super mad. He was like, oh man, this guy stiffed us. And he was like, oh, this guy's like not neutral third party. I hate this guy.
That sounds like Seamus. It wouldn't be surprised if that particular event was triggered by Seamus.
Okay. So it wasn't you that you can remember. It could have been Seamus.
No.
But everything after the
did it on behalf of Seamus's command.
Well, it's important to remember Seamus was like a true pirate, right? Like Sniggerly came right out of the like pirate like ecosystem, and they had like no conjunction or mercy for like the Care Bear crew. Like they're like, oh, Care Bears, juicy meat. Like you know they were not the nice.
Yeah, I think Falcon came out of Snig, didn't he? Before he became Vito, and then eventually CCP Falcon. Well, he was known as
Verone.
I don't think he was part of the original Sniggerly.
I think he was in Snake early on.
He was in Snake early on, yeah, before my time.
Yeah. So a couple of you still play the game. 3 of you, actually, if we include Elise, but and still FC'ing. What would you say to Shadoo and MisterVee? How has FC'ing changed from when they were coalition leaders?
It's so much easier now.
I think
easier.
I think it is easier in so far as it's quite easy. Well, weight of numbers has made it easier for sure, right? All the things, lessons learned, and you know how those things have changed. The way that we manage players and get them into fleets and set them up to do specific things. All of that hard work has been done in the past, and now you can get newer players or any kind of player really to a position where you can get them to do the role you need them to do fairly quickly. So if you've got weight of numbers, that's definitely like it makes it a lot easier now. But some of the like basics of good FC'ing still remain. I think you know, learning how to read like other FCs and the grid and you know, movement of your fleet and stuff, like all of those things that like we were learning off you back in the day. They're still there. Still endeavor to teach them to like new FCs. I think it's easier to start FCing now, for sure.
Well, the ability to lose ships now is so much higher than it ever was historically, right? Traditionally, your alliance wasn't in a position to SRP the fleet and you put out a new one the next day or 20 minutes later, right? Now the ecosystem is just built on like fleets upon fleets being lost every day and there being no real issue with it. Historically, you know, if you lost a fleet as an FC, you had to kind of take a step back and, you know, like one of the things even we struggle with the test is like people are like, oh, who's got the keys for this? I'm like, you all have keys. Go do whatever you want. Like we don't care about losses like to the degree that it used to, where it's like you had to like make sure like each FC only had specific access to specific doctrines because you couldn't afford to lose that fleet concept once. Like the dynamics are very different than they used to be.
Yeah, I think the stakes for FCs are quite a bit lower now as well because of that. Like, you know, but before, if someone who was just starting out had a couple of bad fleets, then that could be them done for good. And that was always something in the back of my mind when I was first starting out, like in my earliest days in Pandemic Legion, thinking like, oh, if this goes wrong, I'm probably not, you know, I'm not going to be able to keep running fleets here because people will just have no faith in me. Whereas now I feel like that, you know, you can recover from that because of, you know, like you're saying, attitudes have changed, ships are easier to replace.
But has it really changed in the sense that people are more willing to take fights? Because that's really when I lost an interest, was that you had to do so much effort to get anyone to fight you. And for a while it was pretty easy for us because it was a bunch of goons, right? We were always underestimated. And on the back of that, we got so many fights. Then people started to learn our names and they were like, oh, EG is here. Let's, you know, wait it out for a couple of days because V is super impatient. He's going to get bored in 2 days. And they were right. I got bored, and I've never been the person who was like all about baiting and setting these traps or whatever, or sieging stuff just to get them to fight because it would be timed into something other than European time zone, and there was nothing you could do.
I would say
has
it's
that,
actually
has that changed?
harder to get fights than it used to be traditionally, just because as time has passed, the meta of understanding that, you know, losing ships is sometimes more relevant than getting a fight has kind of pierced through bit by bit. Like people just aren't as comfortable feeding away relevant fleets anymore. I mean, with non-relevant fleets like Feroxes or Caracals, yeah, you can find a fleet fight almost any time. But with real comps, it's a lot more difficult to get fights than it was historically, I think.
But there's a big difference, right, between now and then in terms of the way, like what you're fighting over as well, right? A lot of the time, the defender for certain things like structures and some SOV scenarios, the defender has such a huge advantage that it's also, you know, unattractive to fight sometimes as well, because you won't make any headway into actually having something that resembles a reasonable engagement.
Yeah, and now that I think about it and I look back at like the Fraternity War, for example, we fought almost every single day, like 250 versus 250 like Munin level fights. Like the time zone is obviously not conducive to what you would want to do, but like every single day there was, you know, opportunities for large scale. Like in real wars, I think the content is like it's almost overflowing, but in this kind of like Cold War, whatever zone we're in right now, I definitely feel like the meaningful content fights are significantly more difficult to find.
I will say one thing that has changed significantly. The really bad players, okay, I don't want to say really bad, but like the middling alliances are no longer like really bad at the game, right? They understand the basic core concepts. So much so that if you get like a pet alliance or like a middling alliance where people don't like necessarily think of like great PvPers, if you were to throw them in a time machine, they would just dominate and throw them back in time. That is, they would just dominate. They would be like Band of Brothers level. So like the parity between like the good and the bad is just getting is so small.
Well, also a lot of the mid-sized alliances have fallen away as they've been, you know,
eaten alive.
group they've merged and consolidated into, you think about how many alliances used to be to make up the CFC, and now you have, a fraction of that makes up the Imperium, because the majority of them sit within Goons. The same could be said for some of the other bigger alliances are now made up of what used to be multiple medium-sized ones, and I guess that's sort of changed the way that we've gone about fighting each other as well, because there's inherently less people now in terms of different entities as people become part of larger groups. So it's things go from being sort of inconsequential to large, rather than having that kind of interesting middle bracket where you have smaller alliances fighting each other and then things escalating over time.
So this will be the last question here for Shadoo and MisterVee, and that is, what are some of the things that you guys miss about EVE Online, or don't miss?
You want to take this first, Shadoo?
No, you go first. I'll think about it.
All right. Ooh, well, what I don't miss is definitely all the stuff you needed to do to provide content for your people, right? Like, a day would consist of your entire remaining free time after work to think about, what should we do? Where can we find content? Spying on people to know what they're going to do, reading scouting reports, reading a million different channels just to figure out if there's any opportunity to do anything. That's why I became such a defensive FC, because I rather went inactive until somebody decided to shoot us, because at least I knew they were coming and where and when. So that's, I definitely don't miss, how much free time that consumes. And what I do miss, the big fights where there was an ego on the line, that was the best thing. You were fighting someone that you personally knew in some way, and you did not want to lose, because you knew what would happen if you lost. It wasn't just you lose your fleet, but you lose face, right? It cut deeply losing a fight. So that's it was all about an ego game. And remember these days where we had this big victory, and the day after I was just still pumped up and energetic from just the adrenaline that rushes through you. But so I do miss that, but not enough to go through all that effort again. And to be honest, yeah, I quit playing the game, but there's so much that kind of remains, right? You meet so many people, a large part of the group of friends in my real life are all because of EVE Online. I live together with my girlfriend, who I met through EVE Online. Actually, super sad about it, but yesterday I had to send an email to all of my friends in European Union that we had to cancel our meetup this year. We were going to celebrate our 10th anniversary of the European Union squad with something like 40, 50 people because of the pandemic now. So even though we no longer play, we still hang out with, I think it's 35 to 40 people who show up year upon year upon year in a meet. So even though you no longer play, kind of the people, they just stick around. So that, I think that's really cool. And if there's a way to get back in, I think it would be cool, but not with all that, not with all the FC effort. It's just too much.
Yeah, I reckon my answer is probably similar. What I miss is the big meaningful wars. You put a lot of time in, but seeing the effect and seeing the hard work pay out, I miss that. What I don't miss is the time between the big wars and the time between getting ready, the time that it took.
Could you say, Shadoo, that when you take a fleet fight, an important fleet fight, 90 to 95% of how that fight goes is simply the momentum of the preparation and everything leading up to it. The fight itself is just, you're calling a primary, but how you got there is where all the effort is.
Yeah, that's right. It is the war is where the effort is. The battle is just the battle, but every time you take the battle, you're aware of where that might go. But I miss knowing when, at the time, perhaps to everyone else, what seemed like a meaningless victory, I knew that the tide was turning, and being able to catch that wave and push it through and see how the effort paid out in the end. I missed that.
Well, this will sound sappy, but I'm sure the game misses you guys too. You guys are still talked about, the stuff you did, all the work you put in. It's one universe, but it's also one timeline. So there's a lot of people who still remember all the stuff that happened. And those that weren't here when it happened, they're dying of curiosity to find out what actually happened. And that's why these shows are so popular. So thank you guys for making some time to show up and tell us some of these stories. And hopefully we'll have a chance to do it again later on when we collectively remind each other like what it was that we were doing. All right. Someone want to say anything? Should we go to news real quick?
We do have a couple of news items we can do at the end like we usually do.
All right, let's do this. Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, first, the Imperium has deployed a SIG to F7C in Cloud Ring. If you're not too busy, come on out and visit us. We've got fleets going out all the time. I've been in a couple already myself, and they're a lot of fun. Mostly, the fleets I've been in, we've been fighting Pandemic Horde, but there are some others nearby, Snuff, etc. So this is fun. Test Online are onlining a Keepstar in Lowsec at the moment in the lovely system of Ignoitum in Sync Liaison. Hopefully that goes well for you guys. Good luck, Vily.
Well,
I don't think
it's another TTT tower, so hopefully we'll be able to provide some beautiful services to the denizens of Lowsec and provide them the great opportunity and ability to do super sales and reactions and cap production and all the rest.
Prosperity for all. Plan for that, guys. And then there's a stream. I guess is it today at 1800 Eve time? That's only about an hour and a half from now. But CCP is doing an EVE Echoes stream on their Twitch channel. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like an EVE Echoes. I think it's like a dev streaming event. So like the devs of EVE Echoes are going to be streaming and like showcasing the game since it's like left the alpha phase and is going forward.
All right. That's all the news I've got right now.
All right. I think there's also going to be another stream later on the, I don't know the date actually, but I thought there was the 20th. That will be about the Triglavian stuff that's happening. I don't know if you guys have been keeping tabs on EVE Online, but they're generating a ton of group gameplay with an alien invader that all the empires are unifying. So you will fight for the empires against these aliens, or you will fight with the aliens against the empires. It's like a new layer of faction war. And the geography of the systems themselves will change. So what might have been a high-sec system can actually get knocked into low-sec, maybe null-sec. So landscape, scarcity, and geography, all that stuff's coming back to EVE Online, so it might make things a little more interesting. All right. I want to thank everybody for showing up today. Co-hosts Carneros, Elise, Vily, Hedliner, and of course, Shadoo and MisterVee. Thank you guys for making time in your schedule for this.
Thank you for having us.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. That's all we have time for this week. We will see you next week with more Talking in Stations.